Welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustin.
And I'm Tim Wade. Welcome to the show that brings you in the know so that you've got wonderful things to talk about now that all these restrictions are lifting and we can gather in large numbers. Now's the time to show everybody all the cool things you know.
It'll either make you a more interesting person or the most irritating person to have at a party. We have with us a fourth person. As always, we're looking for someone to add a new dimension of perspective, take us out of our box, if you like. And this week's guest has a PhD in synchronicity. Now, if you haven't heard of what that is, it's because he was the very first to get that PhD. And he can tell you more about what synchronicity is about as well. But a man with a very colorful past and an even more colorful present. Could you please welcome our guest, Philip Merry?
Doctor.
Yeah.
Oh, doctor. Yes. Beg your pardon. Philip Merry, PhD. Dr. Phil.
Dr. Phil. I like Dr. Phil.
That's good to have you here.
Good to be here, folks. Thanks for inviting me, Andrea. I'm awed by what you guys are doing each week. It's an amazing show.
Thank you. So I know Synchronicity as that classic album from The Police, and with some amazing songs on it, like Synchronicity 1 and Synchronicity 2. How is it that they had 2 tracks on Synchronicity? Shouldn't it be 1?
You got me, Tim. I have no idea. I first listened to them when I was working in the Maldives. I remember nights of just listening to Synchronicity in the Maldives. So there's probably a connection. They probably chose Synchronicity because it's something to do with real synchronicity, but I have really no idea.
Oh, very nice. Well, it's funny you should talk about the Maldives.
So Phil, if you could, Phil, could you clue everyone in on what it is that you're specializing in? I mean, I don't think everyone fully understands what it is, and what's your elevator pitch on that?
You mean now or in my whole business, Joe, or you want just to focus on synchronicity?
We can talk about your. Yeah, who's Phil?
I'm a global team leadership consultant for 40 years now in 63 countries, and I always go where the interest goes as far as my clients are concerned. So a lot of people were interested in how is it that I can attract things to me. So my elevator pitch was I wanted to dive deep into what synchronicity was all about for my own life, but also for my clients. And literally, synchronicity is the ability that you have to attract things to you that answer needs that you have in your life or your business.
Is that like law of attraction?
It's very interesting you say that, Tim. In essence, my research is looking at the science behind law of attraction. Law of attraction got a bad press with some people because it was too kind of, how to attract $1 million and a beautiful girl and a big car. But the essence of law of attraction is very similar to synchronicity.
Cool. I suppose 1 out of 3 ain't bad.
You're terrible, Muriel. Phil, before that, you've had a long and distinguished career, and you've done a lot of different things. Do you want to give us a bit more about what you've done along the journey?
Oh, not a problem. I began as a family therapist. I trained and certified and practiced as a family therapist, working with London hooligans in the 1970s. Then got bored of England and said, I want to get out of here to somewhere exotic. So I got a job as leadership trainer for the youth ministry in Sri Lanka. Absolutely loved living abroad and made me understand that my life was going to be all about helping cultures work together. Went back to the UK. I worked for a large consulting firm, Roffey Park Institute, and leadership training and consulting, and then was hired by Reuters as their leadership training manager for the whole of Asia. So had the privilege of getting paid to travel, working with journalists, working with the rest of Reuters, which brought me to Singapore. First 2 years in Hong Kong, 2 years in Singapore. And I've been in Singapore since 1990, running my own business on leadership consulting, married to my gorgeous wife, Normala. And that's probably up to date. I mean, all three of you know me. But that's actually what I do. But literally, as I said earlier, what I love to do in my business, you've got to keep up to date. So whatever my clients are looking at and interested in, I go and do research. I love to get deep into whatever topic. And so when synchronicity came up as an issue for me that I was interested in, and my clients too, I said, let me do this properly. And I did a PhD in leadership and synchronicity. And I'm about to launch my book, The 9 Keys of Synchronicity. And so you'll see me for the next period of my life. I'm 72 years old today. So next period of my life, I don't know how long that's going to be, but I'm never going to retire. So however long God gives me, and I say God gives me, Tim, looking at you, noticing your recent
I'm not God, though.
I know. Well, sometimes you think you are, but I love your recent entry into divinity school, Tim. I'd love to meet with you and talk more about that. So however long I've got left, Andrea, I really want to focus on how we attract things to us.
I love it. You know, when we'll talk about synchronicity, obviously, as in our theme section, but
sure.
Are your customers, business audiences, open to the message? Or do you think, you know, have you moved?
They think they're not, Andrea, but they actually are. Because in essence, synchronicity is like a spiritual topic. And you know that some people are open to spiritual stuff in business or things that are a bit out of the ordinary. And whenever I get somebody who says, oh, we don't want all that stuff here, because we don't really do that stuff in my organization, I ask them one question. I'll say, okay, you say you don't talk about this, but tell me one thing. Do you talk about team spirit? They said, yes, of course we talk about team spirit. I said, so define team. They define team for me. And then I say, well, can you now define spirit? So when I say a lot of people aren't interested, but it's my feeling that we already use spiritual terms. We use the word spirit all the time in organizations, right? So there's got to be an interest there already. So my mission for the next period of my life is to accelerate that focus within organizations so that people are comfortable to talk about something that's to do with out of the ordinary stuff like spirituality, and synchronicity is linked to spiritual stuff.
That's great. That's promising to hear, you know, that we're moving forward because we need to raise consciousness, right?
Andrea, some are not. Some don't want anything to do with it. But over the period of the last 10 years, a lot more expressed interest.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what they've been exposed to in the past and at what age they made a decision for or against it. And then they've held on to that and look for evidence that supports that decision, presumably. And so it takes a fair bit of convincing. It's like a big tanker that needs to then shift direction if they're going to take it on board, or they have a moment.
No, it's a great point, Tim. And I think we are in an age where your private life and your public life, your personal and your work life are coming together. There has been a sense of, you know, don't bring sex, religion, and politics into public conversation, but that's changing. And I think people want, in the desire to be more authentic with who they are anywhere in their life, I think these topics are actually getting stronger. And I think you're right, Tim. I mean, you will know more about this than me, Tim, but the ability to accept something more than the logical matter of fact that we see in front of us is to do with what happened to you in terms of your own particular religion. When did you switch off or switch on? And I think that's an important factor.
So should we get down to the business of the show, where we talk about the news and wax lyrical?
Yeah, let's talk about the news. What's happening in the news? There's been some really interesting things happening.
There's been loads of interesting things happening. And again, we've got a lot to cover. And I'll try and go as quick as I can. And I'm not going to be able to cover everything that I sent you guys, obviously. But a couple of light-hearted ones. So James Corden is leaving the Late Late Show after 8 years. So I don't know about you. I hope carpool karaoke lives on. But I thought that was good. Another story in Hollywood that I have not been paying attention to is, of course, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard court case. I just think that these are two people that obviously need a lot of help. And I really do have zero interest in their personal lives and anyone else's personal lives, and especially famous people. But one of the topics that has come up through this is the concept of toxic femininity. We've obviously heard a lot about toxic masculinity over the years. So that is an issue that I think, is overdue being discussed. And then, of course, if we go across the pond, we've got British Hollywood, or the British Commons. And Phil sent me a piece. A Tory MP watched porn in the Commons while sitting next to a female colleague. So I don't know what's going over there in British politics, but it seems to be lots of little boys playing adults or something. I don't know. What do you think, Phil?
Oh, it astounds me. I mean, I was shocked by seeing this, and I'm thinking, surely this is just a joke. But no, literally, this guy was sitting next to a female minister, and she noticed that he was watching porn. And Boris Johnson is getting a lot of flack for not naming the MP. So that there's really, it looks like there's no denial that it happened, but lots of neutrality in terms of doing anything about it. And it actually also, Andrea, is on the top of, I don't know if you saw this week, this massive complaint about the deputy of the Labour Party being criticised for flashing her legs to put Boris Johnson off his speaking.
Oh, now, didn't say that one.
There's a massive article in the Mail in the UK. It's a big thing in the UK that some Conservative MP did an interview with the Mail saying that Labour were trying dirty tricks by putting the deputy leader of the Labour Party on the front bench with short skirt and uncrossing her legs while Boris was speaking. And now this is massive stuff. So Boris has had to retract this, but it's funny. And at the same time, Tim, there are 58 MPs currently under investigation for sexual crimes. So I'm just shocked as a Brit that in this day and age, we're still dealing with this in the House of Commons. Yeah. It's pathetic.
The reason why I laughed is, how would you know if Boris Johnson's distracted? Certainly not from his origin.
Well, he's always distracted, isn't he?
Because he'll be just like, she hasn't even arrived yet.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's issued a massive apology to her and said this is no part in the Conservative Party, but he's pushing against the tide because at the same time he's saying there's nothing to do with the Conservative Party. We've now got this Conservative guy watching porn while in the Commons.
Well, I'm just glad that at least nothing else happened. Otherwise, you would have had an unexpected member in Parliament.
The weird this, all rise for the Honourable O. The weird thing is, it seems to illustrate how above reproach some of these ministers think they are. If 50-something are being investigated for sex-related crimes, it's astonishing.
58, Tim.
58. So 58 plus parties during Brexit, plus all of these other things, and now this person's sitting there not, when a balloon drops out of the sky, all the other balloon operators get really tense to try and work out, let's just make this really safe. This is our industry. But there it's just like, nobody can touch me.
Well, what it says to me, Andrea, is that, we guys are enlightened, I hope. We guys really see the benefit of women in leadership and women in politics. But I guess it reminds me that we've a long way to go. That there's this stuff that goes on in the Commons, and it goes on in organizations too. And I guess it just reminds me that we've a long way to go. But it's depressing to actually see this.
It is. And you saw, Australian Parliament had its same-sex scandals in the last few years as well. It's just the old boys club, it's time for it's time for a radical change across the board. Christine Lagarde published an article on LinkedIn yesterday really calling out the need for significantly more female leadership, and made the case for why female qualities are what we need to get the world on track. and I thought it was a really powerful piece that'll be in my weekend reads. But we need to sort something out, and just the lack of respect. And when the person at the top of English politics gets away with what he gets away with, I mean, is it surprising?
Well,
Really,
I don't think you've seen the end of that, though, Andrea. I think that it looks like he's going to go. It looks like there's sufficient lack of remorse in his private words as opposed to his public words, that what's happening is Conservative MPs are worried about getting re-elected because of Johnson. And so they will, I think, slowly but surely, they'll turn the screw and he'll be gone. And
isn't that kind of a sad indictment?
Yes,
that it's only because of that they're deciding to get rid of him, not because of any moral position or leadership influence that's required. So yeah,
that's true. I mean, there are a few Conservative MPs who are expressing outright and in the Commons that they don't think he's worthy of being their leader anymore. But you're absolutely right. It's actually because of fear of losing their seats that will turn against him.
They probably could have left out the word anymore.
Fingers crossed, Andrea, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey, Phil. So with regards to not naming the MP, what was the argument in favor of that? And the reason why I ask is there's been a situation in Singapore about law students.
Yeah.
Have you heard about that one?
Yes.
And there will be so some law students were caught having cheated on numerous tests and exams for their while sitting for the bar, and they've been named.
Well, Tim, it's not various. They cheated on the ethics part of their exam. Isn't that? I mean,
well, I just see it as a bid to create some humor. I think it's rare for Singaporeans. We should laud them for it.
Well, the only laud.
Joe, you will. Joe, why is that though? It's a great point, Tim. I mean, Joe, why is it that that's kind of allowed? Why are people kind of covering that over and saying, yes, we've noted, we'll look at it? Why aren't they just being kicked out?
Well, okay, again, because I have my brain thinks about these things all the time. It's about getting in the way of being able to do the job. So there is this thing about, okay, if I feel that you're worthy to do the job and whatever it is, right?
Okay.
But if you have a situation where one amongst you perhaps is a little deviant in that way, and I think in terms of that, there is also this thing about deviance versus what norm. Right. So the thing that we're saying is that we hold a higher standard, and yet when we look at the data that the porn sites apparently they publish their data, it would indicate that the general mass, the normal person, the person down the middle, is more inclined than disinclined. So we're perhaps we're discussing what rarefied air should look like when perhaps more people are just down the middle. It's poor judgment to watch definitely something like that in that situation in the at the office, I guess. So part of it is, I think it's just about being able to carry on the job in general. If you're going to say, okay, well, that's on one hand, we should say, okay, you know what, you get to do that once and that's it, you should be out. But there's also this thing of, I mean, are you your job? As in, like, is your job based on just you being you? As in, like, if you are a highly effective everything else, and you have, an attention span disorder and a totally impatient sort of nature, where you see a link and I've got to click on this right now. Does it stop you from being that person as well? I mean, if you're in the middle of a deal and doing stuff, I mean, that's the kind of thing that kind of comes to my mind, as in, like, a lot of people are brought.
But Joe, don't you think sorry, go on, Andrea. Sorry.
No, I just think we raise our kids, and we're constantly saying to our boys, if they're doing what we think is inappropriate, we just say it's antisocial behaviour. And I would expect in a professional setting that the same rules apply. You don't watch porn sitting next to a female when I don't care if you're distracted or whatever's going on for you. It's just not appropriate. And if you exercise poor judgment in a professional setting, then that means you're not are capable of doing your job, no matter how brilliant you are at what you do. It's like keeping the arsehole salesperson in the job because they get the higher sales, but they make everybody else miserable, and companies keep the stars even though they create great damage. It's the same sort of justification to me. So, yeah,
I'd agree with you, Andrea. I think more and more, I think character matters. And to me, it doesn't matter how good you are technically or professionally at your role. If you don't have integrity, or if you're a male sitting next to a minister watching porn, a male sitting next to a male, not just a female, these things matter. So I was kind of shocked, Joe. I thought that if it were proven that these folks that actually did cheat in their law exam, that Singapore would take a very hard role on this and just dismiss them. So I'm surprised that we now are saying, well, let's look at it again. I would have thought they'd be just straight out.
Yeah, too much is being allowed to slide around the world, right? And we've got to sort of put that line in the sand of what's acceptable. But let's move on to the next story. So, sorry, Joe. You want to say?
No, I was just saying for especially when you're younger and you're a law student and you're getting your stuff together, you think you've got a good idea. This is a good plan. Do you let someone who hasn't fully developed and hasn't fully worked out everything they're going to do in life completely ruin their life, having done something like that as well? So, I mean, I don't just think about it in terms of a younger person. I always think about the 40-year-old who makes a mistake, right? Is because he crosses the line, right? Do we say, okay, you're excommunicated from this community, right? Or do we go, all right, that was bad.
Yeah, but it's about trust in the judiciary and trust in the legal system. That's the problem.
Yes,
and if anyone is doubting that justice has been served because this person was involved in that 20 years ago, that's causing the problem.
But I would say that if you heard a lawyer cheated at something, it hasn't changed your view of lawyers very much.
But you're right. You're talking about cancel culture and that and redemption. We need to have space for that always. And is there if there's a way for them to show that yes, they've learnt their lesson and they'll never do it again. Yeah, you're right. Why destroy a young life and foolish and making a mistake? We've all been young and foolish, right? So yeah, I agree with that. But and I agree with the need for redemption and not the cancel culture we're wiped out. That's it. Like Chris Smith, Will Smith.
I don't often see myself as hard-nosed here, but this is the legal profession we're talking about. I don't think there's any room for saying, okay, they made a mistake once, let's not ruin their life, let's them get on. I think there's a space for saying this cannot happen in the legal profession, of which we must have maximum trust. I think there's really damage done to the legal profession if anybody feels that, well, these guys cheated on their exams, but they were let off. Now, that would make me think then again, well, what would happen then if they actually don't have integrity when they come to be practicing lawyers and practicing judges? So my sense with this one, I would forgive people generally. I'm strange to hear these words coming out of my mouth, but this is the legal profession we're talking about. And I just think
the thing is, we can still forgive them, and we can still say, look, your life's not over, but that door is closed. But let's help you rehabilitate, so to speak, in this direction. You could serve in a legal way, but just not representing at that particular level.
I agree with you.
And which links to the next story, of course, where Singapore is uncompromising, and that is with the death penalty for murder and drugs use, and as well as
trafficking.
Trafficking, that's the word. Thank you. So there was a story, obviously, in Singapore this week. I'm sure you guys saw a lot more of it than I did. But a young man called Nagin, I can't say his full name, but he's a Malaysian man who had an IQ of 69, which means that he is technically intellectually impaired. And so a lot of the people who were fighting for him, people like Sir Richard Branson and some other quite famous people, But Singapore is unwavering in this law, and it always has been unwavering in this law. I personally am against the death penalty for all reasons, and there's no exceptions. And I've had this conversation with many times. And if you gave me a scenario where you asked me, well, what about if this happened? Would you agree with the death penalty? For me, it's a no. But Singapore is pretty clear that that's the law. But it's been it's a sad case, right?
Yeah, I agree, Andrea, and I'm with you. It's strange. I mean, I've lived in Singapore 31 years. What I love about Singapore is the safety. That you can leave your kids, and there's so many things you can do here that you couldn't possibly do, certainly in the UK where I came from. And I love Singapore. You know that. I'm married to a Singaporean. But there's got to be a place for compassion somehow, somewhere. I don't know if you know, there was another guy due to be hanged this morning. Again, from Malaysia, but he actually had that set aside. So I'm with you on the death penalty, but I live in Singapore and it's a reality for Singapore. But there seemed to be so much possibility that this was a guy who was used as a mule. He apparently went to somebody in Malaysia and asked for money for health for his father. I think that was the story. And the guy said, no, we're not going to give you money, but here's a way you can earn money. And there's enough evidence from obviously one side to say that actually he didn't know what he was doing, and that with his IQ at 69, there was enough room for leniency. I don't know the reality of what went on behind the scenes, but all I've seen is that the government here said there was not sufficient evidence to show that his disability was in any way to do with why he said yes to carrying the 3 milligram, I've forgotten exactly how much it was, but
it'd have to be a large amount. 3 milligrams, I don't think it'd be a problem.
Oh, not milligrams. It was three tablespoons full, Joe.
Yeah, it wasn't a big one.
It was a tiny amount. 3 tablespoons full is what it says.
Yeah,
and there's some evidence too that it's horrible to talk about evidence. It seems from his mother and his brother that he didn't know what was happening to him. And literally on Tuesday, I mean, the law court is like 100 yards from where I'm sitting now. I can actually see it. He asked if he could hold hands with his mother. They allowed him to do that in the basement. And his brother and his mother said to that day on Tuesday when it was denied, he didn't know what was about to happen to him. So far be it from me, because I love Singapore. They get a lot of things right, but I just wish there had been a bit more discussion about this openly and in public, and there wasn't. Joe,
well, I do know that what's happening is the law is being looked at, reviewed, and it's sort of I could be out of date on this, but I do believe that there's some adjustments that are being made.
Okay.
And because I used to, well, my father was a magistrate in Brunei. We had many discussions about law, and I the next thing I was going to say is I was in law school, but that was for 10 days until I saw the size of the library and said that's too much work. The thing about law is it's about precedent, and it's about what is right given the previous thing, right? So like even this idea that someone today has had a reprieve, that's going to cause the nature of justice and fairness and all that is going to raise questions like why this, why that person, not this person, that person, whatever it is, right? So it's a very complex process to take a law that says one thing and then say, okay, now we're going to change that completely because there's history that's attached to that as well. If you say suddenly now, okay, well, up to this amount now is legal, or it's not illegal, but it doesn't get the compulsory death penalty. The history is going to be that there's going to be a list of people who were sentenced for less. And then you go like, well, how does this feel? How does this work? So part of justice is not just justice being done, but justice being seen to be done, and it has to be vis-a-vis the society, right? So again, if 1/10 of us feel something, and there's a larger majority that feels otherwise, that's part of justice. It's not just about what should be right. So there's some times where even the justices have their hands tied because precedents have been set, and they also realize that what they're doing, if they do anything, changes the precedent for other cases. So it is left to Parliament to change it. Parliament is, I know that they've been reviewing it, and they constantly go back to some of the old favorites in terms of laws that are a little bit more contentious. I think there is some I won't say relaxation, but some adjustment with regard to death penalty, but I'm not sure exactly how it's being implemented. But I mean, I just know it's an easing rather than getting tighter.
All right, so moving on to the next story. I found this a pretty disturbing one. It said how TikTok Live became a strip club filled with 15-year-olds. Did anyone have a chance to read this one?
I saw the title. I was disturbed enough.
Okay, yeah, no, fair enough. You know, we've talked before about in China, there's these schools that sort of train these influencers, and then they basically 24 hours a day, their life is live streamed, and they're singing and dancing and eating, and it's all pretty sort of harmless sort of stuff. But this is a whole other level. And, you know, there's one 68-year-old man who's telling 14-year-old girls to kiss each other and take their clothes off. And, you know, they've got all these codes like outfit check. That means pedicure check. So they want to look at their feet. There's a spider on your wall, which is getting the girls to turn around so they can look at their bums. And in return, these girls get gifted. And so they get virtual gifts, which can be turned into cash. So, like, you know, from a 14, 15-year-old girl growing up who's comfortable with her body, you know, there's no harm done in her mind. I can imagine it from her perspective. But
where was this, Andrea? Where was this?
In America, but it's worldwide because it's TikTok. Yeah. But you know, one of the things that my boys aren't allowed to go onto any social media platform unless I can follow them, and they know that I'm not going to check everything that they do. Every now and again, I'll just say, "Oi," you know. One of my boys used the F-bomb on Twitter because he was angry about something and he was being very righteous, and I supported it. But he signed a digital agreement at school where he represents the school on social media. So I said to him, "You have to delete that," and so he did. Right. So, but I don't put too much on him. But if you're not on the platforms that your kids are on, you have no idea what these platforms can do. And it's not about spying on them. It's just about understanding where they are and what that generation is doing, because I think these young girls don't really understand what they're doing. But the most disturbing thing, of course, is the older men who are being turned on by this. And, you know, we're talking about it earlier. I think there's a real sexual sickness in our societies, and we've seen it with the incredible rise of sexual slavery over the last decade. You know, the antagonism between men and women. You know, I was listening to an academic saying there's a war between the sexes, and we're seeing it. Domestic violence towards women during the pandemic. You know, we're talking about toxic femininity, but toxic masculinity is a huge issue. But I just say to parents, just keep an eye on your kids, but not in a way that's going to push them underground, because why wouldn't they? I would if my parents tried to get too involved in my life when I was that age. But just be on the platforms and try and keep an eye on what's going on, because I think this is a really, I think it's a really sad story. So
sure.
You take me off focus, Tim.
but it also speaks, Andrea, to something I guess we're going to talk about later, is the influence of social media and different platforms on mindsets. And I think it's just such an important issue. Obviously, we need to draw the line on it, but it's kind of great that your kids have got a mother like you, right? I guess they curse you sometimes because you're so. But I think you're absolutely right to really keep an eye on what kids are exposed to, and I think it's important.
Yeah, especially if you've got daughters.
Yeah.
All right, should we move on?
Wait, I got 4 of those. All right, yeah, okay, I remember now.
Yeah, exactly.
You got 4 daughters, Joe?
Well, it's a complex
right?
story. It's a complex story. Yes,
Okay.
it used to be 3 and 1, and now 4. So,
okay, all right.
Yeah. The big story, of course, that absolutely took over social media this week was Elon Musk. Yeah, buying Twitter. Once again, we saw instant reactions, instant responses. I saw a lot of people saying, I'm off. They closed their Twitter accounts. So many different opinions. There's I'm obviously going to include loads and loads of articles on that this week. The whole conversation around free speech was going nuts. The alt-right, the far right, they're having a great time. They think it's the best news ever. It's just, the one thing that I was interviewed for a podcast the other day, and it was basically within hours of the announcement going out, and they said, what's your opinion of it? And I said, it's far too early to have an opinion on this because we have no idea what's going to happen. We have no idea what it means. We have no idea what Elon Musk will do. And one of the pieces I really want to encourage you to read was in Reuters, and it says Elon Musk probably won't buy Twitter because he's actually done things like this before. And even though it looks like he would, here's a couple of the reasons why they think he's going to get cold feet. So the first is Tesla. It lost a fifth of its stock value after this announcement was made. And basically, if he steps out of Twitter, the stock will bounce back, which will then give him the financial coverage to pay the penalty to Twitter about if he steps out. So that's one. The other one is China. I didn't realize this, but basically Tesla produces half of its vehicles there, and a quarter of its revenue comes from China. And of course, Twitter and Beijing don't have a good relationship because Twitter didn't get on top of the content being released on Twitter in Hong Kong when it mattered. So potentially Beijing could hold Musk at ransom, which they said that's uncomfortable for a self-professed free speech absolutist, right? In the European Union, they basically said if he doesn't get on top of harmful content, he will be banned. And then, of course, in the US, where they don't necessarily jump on that sort of thing, companies like Apple could take Twitter off its platform because it doesn't comply by their rules. So this is not a done deal. I'm just really interested in the story. I hope it doesn't happen because Twitter is one of my favorite social media platforms. I love the conversations I've got there. I get to have there. I love the people that I'm connected to there. And I know a lot of people aren't even remotely into Twitter these days, but it's still, I think, one of the most engaging platforms where you can meet people in your area of interest who have fantastic conversations. A lot of the environment content I find over there. So, what did you guys think of the show?
Well, I thought, first of all, when I first heard the story, was what a great pump and dump move on on Elon Musk's side, because I mean he can move a market just saying that he's interested in it. But I do think we underestimate what people do when they're at that level of wealth, because and if you think about your own wealth as well, I mean, you think about even if it's not extreme wealth, if something happens and you lose 20% of your wealth, it's not as much of a blow as if to yourself you'd survive that. And if you are someone who's just committed to ideas, and I mean, I think it's arguable that Elon Musk is quite committed to ideas, the way he wants to do things. I think he's going to pursue this. He may have to work with the product because it's still ultimately its product has to be viable. I don't think he's someone who just doesn't listen to anyone. He just doesn't look and behave like he does, right? So I think it's part of the brand. It's one of those things. I think he will. He's definitely, as he says it, he believes it. He's a free speech absolutist, but he's also interested in viability. I don't think, he would have continued producing only the Roadster, simply because that was what he thought was great. He went on to produce all the other models as well, because that's how you create a viable electric car brand. So with Twitter, I think what he's going to do is he is going to work on easing up the controls. I think he is going to do a few things like reinstate Donald Trump, just because you want to be able to have those people be able to say what they say. But there may be something to this. There may be some other. You may be able to have other enhancements to Twitter so that it can still work, so that people can say what they say, but you might not have to see it. I mean, I think that might be something you can do for yourself. You can try to. You could enhance Twitter to a point where it has more AIs running to keep you safe as well. Because right now Twitter is quite, I would say, I won't say basic, but in terms of interventions that it puts out there, it doesn't do very much of that. But you could create something where there is more free speech, but greater filtering and intervention and stuff like that, where you could, as a user, select your experience more.
I noticed your facial expression, Andrea, when Joe mentioned Trump, because one of the things that I think Trump has done so well, and I'm so grateful for, was when they banned Trump and his account, because it meant that no longer did the world have to suffer the vitriol of this guy. So in terms of Elon Musk, it all boils down to how trustworthy do we think this guy is in terms of acting in the public good. And I noticed one of the articles you sent, Andrea, all of the people that I'm sure, Andrea, at least you and I would hate, i.e. right-wing, questionable people, their popularity went up on Twitter when Musk was supposed to be interested. All the people, such as Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and one or two others, they went down in terms of what was happening. So I think the basic issue here is our world has platforms which can massively influence public opinion. This is not an organization producing cars or food or whatever. It's an organization that actually is influencing the way that people think. And so I think we should give very strong attention to whether we allow individuals like that to take over an organization where we don't know whether their morals, their integrity is actually something that we would agree with. And I think there's enough evidence to think about, or to think twice about this. The little synchronicity that happened, and I shared this with Andrea before, is that when I looked at the Reuters article, Reuters at the end of all of their articles actually have something called the trust principles. So as I'm reflecting on your questions, Andrea, about whether this is good or not good, I'm looking at the Reuters principles. Principle number 1, Reuters shall at no time pass into the hands of any one interest, group, or faction. Point number 2, integrity, independence, and freedom from bias will at all times be preserved. Now, there's a reason why Reuters is as trusted as it is. Now, I'm biased. I was for 4 years their leadership training manager, but it's a great company, I think. Yeah. And it's got a reputation for trustworthiness because they adhere very strongly. It's never, as a company, going to pass into any one person's hands. And I do think that with these, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, there's got to be another standard for how they are owned. And I don't think it should ever be by one person of a particular political bias. So that's the thing that worries me.
So if they do that, though, they're going to have to break down News Corporation, which, by the way, would be a good thing. They would have to split up Facebook. They would have to do all of that because it's the oligarchy of business in a weird way. That's sort of.
But they're not owned by a singular person. They're owned by their shareholders. So, best I was saying is Washington Post. Yeah. Yes, is that right? So that's, to me, is single ownership. Twitter, obviously with Musk, would be single ownership, but Facebook and most of the other social media platforms are owned by shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
They're run by individuals. So I think there's a difference there because there's pressure there, right?
Yeah, the basic thing for me, though, Andrea, I don't know how I can assess Elon Musk's character.
I think that's probably to me the thing that's been happening this week, and obviously since he first started talking about it, is I don't think anyone knows who Elon Musk is. I don't think anyone does. And like I'm reading these stories that people are sharing about their personal experiences with them, and they're very nothing kind of stories, it's like 5 minutes in his presence type stories. And he doesn't have a home. He doesn't, we've heard his mum talking about him and his brilliant siblings, but we don't actually really know that much about him. He's a bit elusive, and I think the right call him like that. They love his chaos. They think it's a positive, whereas the left are concerned by it. By this, they call him evil, but I don't actually even know if he's evil. So I don't know him. I think that's probably the thing.
Yeah, I was a bit taken aback when the Johnny Depp pictures started turning up on my feeds, and there was one video used as evidence where Amber Heard is getting to a lift with Elon Musk, and
she was going out with him for a while, right?
Yeah. So then I was just like, okay, but it's a. I thought for a nanosecond that he was doing it to finally crush Truth Social once and for all, but apparently Donald Trump did that when he launched it.
Yeah, he sure did, man. That's just that's a weird story. That one.
Another debacle.
Yeah, mate. It's such a shambles. I mean, it's such a shambles. The top two tech guys quit weeks ago, and you're like, and they won't talk, right? But yeah, it's complete shambles. But
one thing we do know, Andrea, one thing we do know from one of the articles you sent, and by the way, Andrea, I have to say, hats off to you. I was blown away by all the stories that you sent to us. I'm thinking, how does she find time for all of this? So I'm just very much in awe of your research on this one. But one of the articles you sent was all about he agreed to something with Twitter, and the very next day did something that broke the agreement.
Yeah.
And the article implied that if you're looking for some assessment of his character, he's already done things that he said he wouldn't do with Twitter. So my sense is let's hope. But the bigger question is, how do we keep control of these organizations? I mean, like TikTok, which is this story is linked to TikTok in a sense, and your story earlier. How do we keep control of these organizations which have people who can do and say what they want? And I think that's an important issue for the next generation.
Yeah. So he's basically viewed as a figure of chaotic good on the right, and he's viewed as someone embodying chaotic evil on the left. I go back and forth between the two. Like sometimes I'll watch him play, and I'm not sure what he's trying to achieve, but I don't think it's bad for somebody to be, breaking up the status quo sometimes. But then other times he'll do something, and I'm like, that's not good. So he just leaves me confused. So, but again, I think give this story time. Like he's known for changing his decisions and doing different things, and he's gonna. I mean, this is a job that has so much additional external pressure on him, and he doesn't like external pressure. He doesn't like shareholders. He doesn't like other people getting involved in his business, and just even that, I think, would be something for him to go, what am I? I don't want to do this. Have you ever accepted a job and gone, I don't want to do this? Why am I saying yes to this?
I think too many times in my career, I thought that I can do something that I want to do it my way, but discovered that the journey was a bit different. And I think Elon Musk is someone. Okay, so and again, with due respect to anybody who's on the spectrum, but I mean, he is on the spectrum. That's my assessment. I have no qualifications to say so, but he behaves very.
He is. He admitted it himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he is free from some of the things that those of people less on the spectrum or if you cannot be less on the spectrum, you can be in a different spot.
What do you mean by on the spectrum, Joe? I don't get that.
He's a high functioning autistic.
Okay.
So for me, what I've understood is Asperger's, which is sort of like autistic adjacent, right?
Asperger's doesn't exist anymore, and now everyone's on the autistic spectrum. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So he in some ways he's free from some of the things that make us social, right? Because we're social, we say something and then we are therefore inclined to be behaving consistently with the last thing we said. So there's commitment and consistency behavior, right? If you're free from that, it's actually very easy for you to go like, no, this is a better thing right now, and I'll do it. So that's what he tends to do, right? If you look at what he's done that several times. In his own business and career and whatever, and succeeded because of it. So the market has rewarded him for that kind of behavior in terms of evidence of things that happened in the past. I'd say there's a lot to say that that kind of behavior has been good. He is an innovator in the face of convention, right? So he's going to do stuff like this. So. I don't think we don't know his personality. I think we do. We just realize that that's what it is. You cannot expect consistency, but you can expect someone who's constantly thinking about something else. And saying, what else could I do, right? So, if you like, it's like dealing with a sanguine mind who says, "I want to do this," and in that moment they want to do it, but they may have this other brilliant idea. And because they have the ability to do it and move stuff, they might just move ahead and do it as well.
Yes.
So I thanks, Joe. I didn't realize that. So it's still then for me, Andrea, the big question is, what do we have the right to do in terms of regulating organizations like this that are so influential on the public mindset? And I don't know enough about what regulations exist, but I certainly do know that when they banned Trump, to me that was a public good. But then again, of course, I would say that because I am who I am, whereas millions of people were outraged by it. So should an organization have that ability to be able to constrict and regulate free speech as they see it, and assume that Twitter took the point of view that Donald Trump went over the line in terms of free speech, which was causing harm to others? So I don't even know. Andrea, maybe you know the answer to this. Where's the regulation? Who's the regulation authorities that regulate this? I don't know.
His ban was after the January 6 riots that he was seen by Twitter to have incited them. So that's when it happened, and they'd only been sort of playing before. But the US government it's called the Section 270, I think, which is the legislation for social media companies. And so while Trump and Biden have got different approaches to it, they are going through the process of working out how to legislate. The problem is, the people who are in government positions typically aren't very social. So I'm very concerned about their ability to legislate platforms that they don't understand. But for me, it's about misinformation, disinformation. It's about information that is dangerous for society. To me, there has to be, like during COVID, sharing misinformation, fake news, that sort of stuff, that harms society's ability to deal with the situation. So, but I know that, the European Union is probably the most advanced as far as looking at legislation and acting. If you want to be in Europe, you've got to follow their rules.
So
but the rest of the world, it's
I guess I'm looking to you, Andrea. Andrea, I'm looking to you then to answer this question, because the woman who experienced the massive gain once Elon Musk was interested was this crazy Republican woman in America. What's her name? The one who constantly...
Marjorie Greene?
Yes. She's right at the top of having a massive increase in her following since Musk took over. Now, what does that say about Twitter if she's right at the top?
I don't know if it's because of Musk, but she's been getting a lot of media lately, so it potentially could be more about that. She's been speaking on different channels, basically saying, I didn't do this on January the 6th, and then they're showing video evidence that she did do this. So it's probably more around the recent media attention she's been getting.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was the article you sent. I did read the articles, Andrea. The article you sent saying that since Musk announced that he was going to take over, her popularity in terms of hits was the highest of anybody since he announced interest.
It could be linked to that, but also she's been in the media a lot just in the last week. So it could be an overlap there.
Okay.
Making it out to be something that it isn't, to suit a narrative that suits somebody, you know.
Well, she's the most, like when you have a story, the news is always going to be looking for the story that fits, right? They're looking for a story that is adjacent to what is being spoken about at that very moment, right? So that's really why she is getting all that. I think this is why she's getting all that coverage right now, is because she is the relevant story that goes along with this particular story right now.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah. Another story that's been getting some attention is everything you need to know about the hepatitis outbreak among children. So this is in Israel news. But basically, the World Health Organization has encouraged the Israelis to do some investigations, because there's also been similar outbreaks in Britain, Scotland, the United States, and Spain, where most of these cases are in children aged 2 to 5. And some of them, that no one's died, none of the children have died yet, but some of them it's gotten so bad they've actually needed a liver transplant.
Wow.
I can't even imagine the experience for the parents going through that. The hepatitis is from an unknown source, and while the article that talks about it cannot 100% verify this, basically the only thing in common between all of the children is that all of them got COVID 3.5 months before they got the infection. So, that's one of those other post-COVID sort of conversations. And we're not really talking about COVID that much today, but I thought that was an interesting piece of information. We've talked a lot about long COVID and how much is unknown, around this. But you can imagine for kids in countries where there's no healthcare or no access to healthcare or poverty in America, those children will potentially die, right? They won't be able to get the liver transplant. So I thought that was a piece worth mentioning.
Well, I don't think I have to add anything to that. It's just one of those situations. There is going to be a wave of things that will come our way as well. We will see. The heart is the organ as well that has been affected by COVID, and the experts are expecting more incidences that are linked to that. Everyone I've spoken to so far says, if you have COVID, look after your heart for the next year at least, just to keep an eye on things. So, there's a lot more.
Is that if you've also been vaccinated, or just for everyone?
Well, no. The risks around vaccination are more the immediate, but for COVID infections in general, there is this little bit of data that seems to indicate that there is something to do with the heart, that the heart is affected greatly by COVID. In the vaccination process, your exposure may not be as prolonged and may not affect you that much. Again, I'm not qualified to say this, but those who suffered COVID, they do have a tendency to show up with some heart issues after. So the concern will be there, because COVID isn't just a disease that sits in the body, right? It actually affects the organs. So,
and the brain.
Everything. One of the things about it is just how much it can affect you in anywhere in your body as well. It's just crazy.
Can I just say something? I think I've got long COVID. I'm 72 years old. I'm in the risk category. I've had all the vaccinations. I'm negative for COVID. I had COVID and then negative. But then the last month or two, I've had real problems. And when I went to my TCM, said to me last week, Philip, it looks like there's something going on in your heart. So as he looked at me, so the thing for me is I'm fully with you, Joe. I don't think we know what's going on. When it came to should I have the 4th vaccination, I'm not sure that I want to, because I think I'm sure that my COVID vaccination stopped me getting bad COVID, getting seriously sick.
Yeah.
But we don't know what the vaccination did and what COVID did. We don't understand it enough to know what's going on. And I still, when I talk to people, I think I've got all the stuff that they say long COVID is about, but I don't know who to go and talk to because of the mystery or the strangeness of it all.
Is your heart okay?
Who knows? I mean, my TCM says it's not, and he's given me some medicine for it, but I've noticed that my heart is beating stronger and faster than it has done previously. So I don't know where to go to get that certain, because, and Joe's right, because there's now so much uncertainty. So this has come from your story in Israel, Andrea. Who knows where it came from? Who knows what the vaccination and what COVID has actually done to us? We think we're over it and we're celebrating in Singapore, going around without masks, although I see lots of people with masks here in Singapore. We actually really don't know what's going to come next and what's going to turn up next is my feeling.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move into the global politics, and we'll start off with a good news piece as far as I'm concerned, and that is that Macron won the election over Le Pen, and I was like, he may not be perfect, but we don't need any more far-right leadership in the world right now. So I was very happy to hear that result when I woke up the next day. Were you guys happy too?
Yeah.
It's a funny thing.
Sorry, go on, Joe.
No, I just say it's just such a funny illustration of a marketing principle, right? Always have a second best product, and then the best, and then that other product looks much better. It's like if you can disagree. I think there are quite a few French people who disagree with Macron who went like, yeah, at least we didn't get the other one.
Yeah, exactly. And she did get more votes than she's had before, right? So it's not like it's going to be an easy run for him.
That's true, Joe. But look at the global trend. We've got more right-wing, whatever you want to call them, people raising their heads all over the world at the moment, fueled by Trump and what happened there and the ability to just stand up and spoke racist views and all the rest of it. I'm happy that Macron won, but he was affected because she had lots of complaints about her shady financial dealings, and that began to pull her down. I don't know whether it necessarily reflects the death of right-wing politics in France or anywhere in the world. And I just think anything could shift that, which is why I'm so anxious to get rid of Boris.
I think the thing about right-wing politics it's not just because there are people who are creating the supply for it. There is also this thing about the demand for it, right?
Yes.
Circumstances make the message make more sense, right? That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is the controversial thing, right? I mean, if there was such a thing as a right-wing politician who behaved more like a Democrat, that would actually be someone who could, I think, shepherd a lot of countries through the situation that they're in right now, because you'd then be able to hear everybody's concerns, and then because your nature is to try to go like, but we'll do it my way anyway. You could have that combination that kind of works that way, because I mean it is about the market. It's the market of ideas, the market of circumstances. The world is in a situation right now where things are tough, things are difficult. You don't know exactly where you are. You don't have control. And you're looking for someone who shows you the way and gives you a story. Someone sells you a story that seems to make sense. And then what happens is that we go into that, commitment and consistency, right? So I agree with this part of you. Therefore, I'm going to follow you throughout the rest of the journey. It's actually one of the crazy things. You can lead someone to agree with other things that they didn't really sign up for in the first place because they agreed on this little thing at the start.
Right.
I think a lot of Americans got on board with Donald Trump because they did buy the idea. Go like, yeah, it's time to make America great again. and then the
And
rest of the
only he can do
contract
it.
was read out. Well, yeah.
Sorry, Tim. What did you say, Tim? I missed that.
I said, and only he could do it. Going back to the French election, the thing that strikes me as being a bit of a warning sign is that the platform on anti-immigration and calling for an immigration referendum is going to be something that's going to get increasingly important as movements of people start to move around the world because of the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting sort of, it's simmering below the surface, but it could very soon launch all these right-wing politicians, like, you know, far right politicians into power, because they've always stood for that. And when immigration starts to become a real social and economic pressure on a country or on a region, and it looks like a wave is going to come into their country because of climate or war or whatever it is, then that could be a tipping point for global politics in this sort of way. And then that leads us into wars and all this sort of stuff as you get this sort of thing. So
it's a massive concern, you know, and we're not even thinking about it. And, like, you know, we've talked about it before, but we need to get ready for the climate refugees. I was reading, I think 7 million. No, it's like 700 million Africans will be on the move. Sorry, it's a big difference in the numbers I've just quoted, but it's somewhere. This massive flood of people are going to have to leave their country. You know, the countries we're living in, potentially we could have to leave, right? We need to get the infrastructure in place to get ready for that. And that will stop the right wing, the wars. You know, if we can't, because the people who need to move are moving because the people where the countries that they need to go are the countries that created the problem, right? So we have to get on top of it.
Isn't that interesting, Andrea? As you're speaking, I'm thinking about the Rwanda thing in the UK.
Yeah.
Now, we know that it's been done for whatever reason, but as I've looked at some of the, you know, news on it, I think there is a sense from a lot of Brits who say, well, anywhere but the UK. There's some people saying how awful it is that we're actually sending migrants to be processed in Rwanda. But there's a lot of people who are saying, well, thank God it's not here. They can go to one of these other countries like Rwanda. It's just a place that they belong. They should go there. And I'm with you, Andrea. I think that this is going to come more and more. And it's really to your point, Tim, that actually it is a massive issue which could tip things very quickly. And it depends really, of course, on governments, but it also depends on the ordinary citizen being willing to say, we are a global family. Of course, we've got space, come and live in our country. And it really depends on those who are willing to and those who are not willing to accept that mindset.
And our political leaders need to be having the conversation with their people now, right? Rather than, you know, the Le Pens, we're going to build walls, we're going to shut them all out, you know, that sort of language. And people respond to that language. Like, exactly. Yeah, that's what we want. That's what we want. Yeah. But the majority, exactly. But the majority, I believe, do not want that, especially the younger generation who are now becoming the largest demographic with voting, you know. So, but we've got to get ready. We've got to. And, you know, like the amount of land that's going to be available in the future for humanity to live on is very, very small. And we need to work. And so there's not enough land to plant crops to feed everyone in this future, right? If we allow it to go as far as that. And that's the thing. If we allow it to go as far. And if we can decide today that we're not going to allow that to happen, like water mismanagement is a huge issue around the world. People will leave if they've got no access to water. But if the only reason they've got no access to water is because of mismanagement, then let's solve that so people stay. Because if people stay, we're not going to have this, you know. So we're just that big picture thinking. It's just it's really not happening enough, and it's really frustrating for me because it's obvious what we need to be looking at now, not when it happens. Now. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's Andrea, it's absolutely vital what you're saying, and the more I see of what you do, the more I love what you do. but it fundamentally depends on that personal attitude of, am I in it for what's good for me and my own and my tribe, or do I see my tribe as global humanity?
Yeah.
And I wish I was I am optimistic, actually, but at the same time, I think there are many, many people who actually don't really think of themselves as part of a global family.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's getting more, but to me, as I look all over the world at the politics of the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, I've not been optimistic, and I want to be.
Yeah, it strikes me as a sort of a Maslow's hierarchy of global needs. And that is when pressure, like, everyone's like, yeah, oh no, we're all part of the global family, until the pressure starts to happen, and then it's like, well, I need to take care of my own.
Yeah.
And we drop down all these levels to survival, which is protect my circle.
And let me express that in very simple terms, Tim, because I'm responsible for taking care of my own. When my wife and I got COVID, there was a shortage of this throat spray that actually prevents COVID from going to the lungs. And I was down in Best Denki supermarket, and I said, let me just go check if they've got this. They had 6 of them. So what did I do? Did I say, let me just take one and leave it for the 5 other people? Or did I say, great, let me buy them all?
You are the betadine bandit we're
so
hearing
I actually took all 6 of them. So it does come down to personal behavior. I didn't think in my head at that moment, well, there are 6. There are probably 5 other families who need them, so let me leave the 5 there. I actually took all 6. And I think that's the sort of behavior that's present in all of us that we need to think about.
Yeah.
Forgive me, please, universe.
Well, no, now you've got some extra vials, so if anyone needs it, they can reach out to you, right?
Actually, what I did do was give it to the rest of my family. I've got a pretty big family. Namala's got about 20 members of the family, so I distributed it to everybody in the family.
Yeah, so you did the right thing. But we do take care of our own, right?
Yeah, we do.
So we have to keep moving, but there's one article, it's called How Russia's Invasion of Ukraine is Fracturing Peace in the Arctic. This is a really important, it's in Vox magazine. It's a really important article to read because this is one of the zones that's, a place of peace, and it's now not because of this war. So I encourage you to read it. Another one is in the Atlantic, Why the Russian People Go Along with Putin's War. So apparently in January, his popularity was 69%, and now in late March, it's moved up to 83%. And the article sort of says, perhaps more ominously, Russians appear to be informing on one another in growing numbers, condemning friends, neighbors, and colleagues for insufficient support of the war effort. And then in a speech, Putin said his fellow Russians' ability to distinguish true patriots from scum and traitors and simply spit them out like a fly that accidentally flew into their mouths. And to me, this is the sort of language, like, if you're supporting a leader that says things like this about the other citizens in your country, and, true patriots, and we've heard that in the US, we've heard it everywhere. I mean, just that to me is it's a phrase of division that we have to say we're not going to accept it anymore, because a person can be proud of their country and disagree with something. But it's an interesting article, because I think, and I just saw today there's some big protests starting to happen in Russia. So it went quiet for a while. People are scared. Some people said to me recently, only 10% of people in Russia are really sort of informed about what's going on. To create a revolution in a country, you only need 2% of the population. So don't think that that's a hopeless thing. 2% is not a lot. So it's still possible. And NATO are saying they think this war could go on for decades. Still, since we first started talking about Ukraine, the number one way that we can get to the end of this war is by Russia standing up and saying we're not doing this anymore and getting rid of Putin. It's still the only way that I can see.
Yeah. So this all this stuff we're talking about in terms of what is unthinkable. I mean, why would Russians follow along with this narrative? Why would they feel it's justified, right? it's kind of the flip side of the story of all of us and Trump, right? I mean, we didn't really like Trump, and we probably had a lot of nasty things to say. If we had our way, we'd get him. So the Russians in Russia, right? If you think about the majority, again, this is about the kind of propaganda and the effect that it's had, right? If you can convince an audience that this is what's happening, right? So it's not we describe this and we report this as how Putin frames the war effort, or Russians in the war effort. Whereas in Russia, it's not that. It isn't being spoken of as the war effort. They're actually intervening and defending on behalf of those who can't fight. So it's a totally different sort of circumstance that they're looking at as well. So if you are looking at this and going like, here we are, from that perspective, right? Here we are. We have this heroic thing we're trying to do. We're trying to stop these horrible people. They're Nazis. They are attacking Russians, and they are attacking children and all that. And we want to stop all this. We want to stop all these atrocities. And in and amongst ourselves, we have people trying to stop us from doing this. So that's their perspective. If you don't know any better, right? So they got, again, this thing about learning a little bit and then being committed to it, and then it carries on. It takes a long time for someone to go, no, this is not right, you know. So if you go back to Germany when the Nazis were in charge, there was, it took a turn. It didn't really happen just like that. It didn't say, people just say, no, this is not right. It moved along. The people got enrolled into the role they were playing and what they believed in, and then they began to talk about in reference to the fatherland and all those different things. So the movement had a meaning of its that drove it, and it really does take a significant change. So Russia has a really difficult problem. I mean, not Russia, the world has a difficult problem because there's some examples of this, right? You have children of older Russians calling them and speaking to them and trying to tell them what's happening. And it's your own flesh and blood. And they're being essentially disowned for having that sort of a view. As how you too, are you another one of these people who are trying to tell me that all this is not really true? Because what you're actually asking people to do is saying that what I know, not just believe, what I know to be true is not.
Yeah.
And it's a tall order.
Yeah.
Can I say it? Because something really this week has really begun to worry me. I think most of us, all four of us, I think, and grew up in a world where nuclear war was unthinkable, in the sense of there's an accepted wisdom and assumption that nobody's going to press the button first, because that means you're also going to get retaliation from the other country. I'm kind of worried at the moment that assumption maybe doesn't hold anymore. And I've said that because my stupid Prime Minister Boris Johnson started revealing that the Brits were training Ukrainian soldiers in Poland. Now, if anybody thinks that Boris Johnson is a great leader and Partygate is just one blip, the fact that he will say publicly, putting lives at risk, that Britain is training Ukrainians in Poland, because what happened is that Russia now is targeting Poland. And Russia now has said, Putin has said, let nobody be in doubt the speed of our reaction should anybody interfere, targeting specifically. And actually one of his advisors said, it just takes one bomb to wipe out the UK. So I began to think this week, wow, what if a nuclear bomb does land in the UK? And what does that do to my family? So is it, I'm interested in all three of your views, are we moving to a stage when people will, or Putin will, actively say, I'm going to press the button? Because I was brought up in the generation where we didn't think that was possible. But has that changed?
I think this last week's been a bit of a frightening escalation from a nuclear perspective. So, just to some of the news that they believe that the conflict is now moving into wider territory. So Moldova's become involved, and so the Russians are basically saying they're not going to sell. They've stopped gas to Poland and Bulgaria. So for Poland, it's not such a big deal because they've only take 50% of their supply from Russia. But for Bulgaria, it's 90%. But the European Union stepping in and helping out. But I think the biggest piece of news isn't necessarily in nuclear weapons, but the way Russians are treating the nuclear power stations in the Ukraine. So they're shooting weapons over these power stations. And so it was the 36-year anniversary of Chernobyl this week. And like we saw the Russians go into Chernobyl and take it over in the early stages of the war. Do you remember that? And and just treating it in a like the guys that were there and who didn't want to go because they needed to make sure that the facility was safe, were freaked out by the behavior of the Russians. And now we've got this escalation where they're shooting rockets over these power plants. And if one of these goes into a power plant, we've got another potential Chernobyl. And then, of course, you've got the defense minister talking about nuclear attacks. And then there was this incredibly, I couldn't believe what I was watching. It's called Russia's State TV Warns Nuclear War is Probable, and we all die someday. And it's this lady who's the voice of the Kremlin. Yeah. And, but was she being one of the things I was wondering when I watched that is, was she being a voice, or was she actually saying, hey guys, pay attention, this shit's getting real, we need to get on top of it? So it actually could also have been a warning. I don't know. If they set off nuclear weapons, well, we're all screwed, right? But yeah, that's kind of been an escalation this week, which if you're paying attention to it, and a lot of people don't want to pay attention to it because it's just too depressing. But that's frightened me.
I agree, Andrea. That's exactly the same thing that I saw. The woman said, we all die someday. And this is a senior advisor within the government, all said either we lose in Ukraine or it's World War III. Yeah. So it just felt to me that there's a changing of attitude and mindset that my generation certainly said nobody's going to start a nuclear war. And now I look at this stuff and I say, maybe that's not true anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's also fair to say that during all times past in the age of mutually assured destruction, right? That there was a belief that it would happen, it could happen, and that's the whole thing. It's just that there was a very good reason for not having it happen, right? I think we have the same sort of circumstances here. I think something like this, where they talk about we all die sometime, it's almost. I mean, to me, I as usual, find a cheeky loophole in the whole thing. Like, well, then we should just kill them all, because they kind of signed off on it. Say we all die sometime. Okay, it's your time, But
are we getting back to assassinations, Joe?
No, I'm just playing it out like a game of chess, right? So the thing that I've always talked about is the sad thing about humanity and big change is that it's almost always the case that someone has to die. Something has to happen where enough people go like, that is not right. That just makes me feel, makes us feel bad enough to go like, no, that we can't do that. Then something happens. So I really, really hope it doesn't take another nuclear explosion in a populated space to make the world go, no, we're not going to do this.
Yeah, or even, just bombing one of the energy stations, right? It's like, but the other story that's happening in the world at the same time, of course, is with China. And this week, China's talking about expanding into the Solomon Islands. I don't know if the Solomon Islands are going to go underwater at 1.5. Do you guys know if they're one of the islands?
Yeah, there's some talk of that, Andrea.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. So anyway, obviously America and Australia are going, it's going to be war. It's like, oh, for God's sake, will you guys stop talking about this? We need to talk to each other. But let me give you a relatively happy political story. In Australia, which the May election's coming up, and of course, as you will probably be aware, I'll be very happy to see Scott Morrison voted out. But they had the biggest day of enrolments in history. More than half of the 700,000 new enrolments were from 18 to 24-year-olds. And of course, in Australia, it's compulsory to vote, right? So it's considered a democratic miracle. But what's really, really fascinating about this is there's a lot of things that are fascinating about it. The political parties, the typical ones, Liberal and Labor, are still campaigning like they've always done. And the traditional way of campaigning is to get the votes of the older generation because, of course, the boomers have dominated this voting cycle for, I don't know how long. So I think I shared something on it just yesterday. I'm a Gen X. I will not have more voting power than my parents until 2028. So when, we've talked about the demographics before, but this is really important. In this article in the ABC, they say that the millennials and Gen Z won't have more voting power, which surprised me because this is the time when they actually surpass the boomers. But the two big issues for the younger voters are climate change and mental health access. So they're the two biggest issues. So the coalition attacked Labor on climate change, saying it's gonna send electricity prices soaring, right? So for the young people hearing that message, they don't care about the electricity prices soaring, probably because they're not paying the bills. But even if they were, what they care about is the cost of lowering emissions. So it's a really interesting thing. So the two major parties are not catering to this audience. They're not talking what they care about. They're not even participating on the platforms that these kids are actually watching. These kids don't have TVs. They have phones, right? So they're on pay-per-view channels or, channels that you subscribe to. So the kids aren't actually even watching what they're doing on these media formats because they exist in another world. So to me, it's actually probably one of the most interesting elections going on as far as where we are in the world and what we need to do, as well as youth vote and youth power increasing in the world, which will change the vote. And when we talked about the rise of the right wing, I actually think that this is one of the hopes that the kids have got a different view, and independents in Australia will get a significant number of seats for the first time because there's a revolution going on as far as politics goes. And young people are saying we've had enough of the bullshit that we've been seeing for decades, and we're going to do something different. And so that gives me hope. The one thing that I don't like about the election that's going on is the trans community are being used as political fodder. And, they're talking about mental health. Well, 56% of people in the trans community have been calling out to the helplines because their distress levels have gone up. So in the last election, they went after the Somalis, which was not a problem. They just turned it into a problem. This time they're going after the trans community. And I think young people are sick of that sort of stuff too, that ugly politics. So anyway, that's an interesting story. Tim, have you been watching it?
It would be really interesting. What would be interesting is if Australia's election somehow sparks a shift in other similar countries.
Democracies,
some of the other democracies which have a similar sort of setup, because if we can move away from that poisonous vitriolic rhetoric and scapegoatism and grenade launching and get into sort of positive, not so much positive politics, because bad news tends to sell, but we need more visionary leadership.
Yeah, we need to get rid of that media too.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, if it can be shown that it's not going to, because what tends to happen is there's this global group of election winners that tend to travel the world and get hired. If you help me win the election, then now I'm going to hire you to help me win my election. Yeah. They tend to survive until they lose. Have you noticed that? We're always hiring. Australia always tend to hire somebody from the US who did something, and they never seem to get Australia. so it's but there was a time I remember in the 80s or 90s when I think it was the 90s when it was all about. I think it was Howard said this election's about who do you trust, and then every election around the world had the same message. You know, and it was all about who do you trust, who do you trust, who do you trust, and then it was fear campaigns versus who do you trust, and that's been working. It's been working all this time, but with this generational shift in voting majority, it could be really interesting because it's a very skeptical younger generation, and the older generation may not tend to swing as much.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah. So it's
and it's not about criticizing the older generation, because I think that's been a bit of a problem, you know, the anti-boomer sentiment. And it's not about that. Different age groups have different priorities. And you know, and the language of politics is about serving the boomer community because they know their priorities, because they've studied it. Well, now these young people are coming up in large enough numbers, and they're saying, yeah, but we've got different priorities. And you're being so consumed by targeting that demographic, you've ignored ours, and so we're not going to reward that anymore. Here we go. So I think it's a time of renaissance. It's a renaissance.
It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for the real issues to be the ones that a government is voted in on. Yeah, and there's hope there, right? There's hope. There's hope until it doesn't happen. I mean, there was hope the last election until it didn't happen, and it's sort of Cole Stroking got elected in. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, but it's the demographic shift is now. It wasn't then. It was still too early.
I think that the big challenge that this group will face actually is still going to be if they don't change the voting tendencies of the older demographic, and the idea that the older demographic isn't going to change its position, actually, I think is false. You know, you just need to have the right person carry the right message to you. I think one of the great campaigns that someone should try is talk to your grandpa. You know, it could make a change, because what I think happens is we have a default way of going about our life. You belong to your tribe until you realize that, you know, they've done maybe haven't driven the economy or the country in the right way, and it doesn't make that much of a significant difference to you until someone you know is affected that way, right? So, like in the area of attitudes towards being gay, right? That significantly changed when people began to realize it was in their family. They met someone, they knew someone in their family, and then it was like, oh, and then it changed it. So you know, I think the problem with a lot of politics is the politicians do want to divide and conquer. They want to divide and get their slice of the audience. But what it really should be about is, okay, how do you then galvanize that audience and do something about it, right? So the last time we saw that, I think the great success was probably when Obama came to power, right? I mean, that was a change in how people showed up to vote, right? There was a groundswell, and then there was also some sharing and pushing, which added more numbers. But I think there's more to that. I think if more people, one of the things I really have difficulty with is when people talk about, when you talk to people, don't bring up religion, politics, sex, right? All those things. When ultimately that's what divides you. So why not talk about it more, right? Why not say, okay, this is dangerous territory, but let's not keep it dangerous, right? Wouldn't it be good we get to the point where we go like where it used to be a long time ago, I think, where you could have different points of view. The Democrat and the Republican could sit together, you know, argue in Congress, and after that go and have a drink. You know, that's the kind of camaraderie. You accept that you're politicians, and it's politicking, but you still are decent human beings, right? There's no need to make someone the enemy and cast them outside and do all that. So I wish we had more conversations about politics. I just wish that, because I've often been told, no, let's not bring that up. Because I do bring those things up, as I'm sure you can guess.
Well, you know, growing up in Australia.
Joe, absolutely. I loved everything you just said. Absolutely loved everything you just said. one of the sadnesses about the guy who was executed, the poor Malaysian guy we talked about earlier, was it's a sensitive issue, we know. I put on my Facebook the Guardian article and said, this is an interesting issue. I'd love to discuss some of the things that have not been discussed. My Singapore friends, what is your view? I had one like or one cry. Somebody cried, did the emoji which was crying. No other comment. And what I love about Singapore is the politeness and the concern for each other. What causes me difficulty sometimes, Joe, is exactly what you're saying. Okay, we may end up saying we support the decision the government took, but please let's just talk about it. And nobody wants to. And I think that's to our detriment, because this is such a, for me anyway, Singapore is such a great society. But to move forward, we need to be comfortable to put the uncomfortable things on the table. And I think if we did that, we'd actually move forward. I liked what you said, Joe.
Yeah.
Andrea, you were saying something about Australia.
Yeah, you were raised in Australia predominantly, right? So you know that Australians.
Actually, I actually spent most of my life in Singapore. Actually, that's the thing.
Okay.
My parents migrated, but I don't. A lot of people like to blame my behavior on something. It's imported and borrowed from everywhere. So I would say American media. I lived in Australia for a while, but I carried a different sensibility, and my mom had a great influence on me in terms of fairness and stuff like that. Because as I said, we had to push and struggle against what were deemed unfair situations. That may or may not be the case, but the feeling was always that. So I carried that chip on my shoulder all the way through to my career.
Yeah. No, it's just more when you're exposed to the Australian culture in any sort of meaningful way. One of the things that you certainly learn is everything's up for an argument. Everything. And sometimes the way Australians argue, and I've experienced this myself, it's like people are like, oh my God, I can't believe you're being so aggressive. I'm like, no, I'm not. We're having a conversation, aren't we? And they're like, oh no. And it's just different. It's a very much part of the Australian culture, which I value. And but it doesn't always translate very well. Even on social media, you'll see Australians sort of interacting with something feisty, and other people go away. And I've had private messages from people going, oh, I can't be involved in that conversation. It's too aggressive. And it's like, no, it's not. Just people just talking. That's literally what we're doing. But but
I think
anyway,
it has to do. I'm just going to say it may have something to do with the sports we play, right? Because I always think you can always see how tough a society is and how able it is to handle difficult stuff by the kind of sports it plays, right? So to me, Aussie rules basically sets the standard for what you are up for, right? It's like, we're going to play this game, we're going to be rough, we're going to climb on each other, and we're going to play until the end when we all cramp out. So it says a lot about it. You know, American football, on the other hand, we'll all act tough, but we have lots of safety gear.
Well, then you got the Brits with their rugby, right? Well, obviously it's gone everywhere. But one final article in the political section that I really want to encourage everyone to read is one. It says U.S. Treasury's Yellen, White House say World Bank needs major reboot. This is such an important article, which is really talking about the largest institutions in the world who have been providing funding and financing to the developing countries around the world. They all need to completely transform, and this is radical transformation. And it's obviously not just the World Bank, but it's all of these big institutions. So keep an eye out. I feel relieved that the conversation has finally started. It should have started 10 years ago. It didn't, but it's starting. So I thought that was really important. But let's move on to synchronicity. So, Dr. Dr. Phil. So we're going to hand it over to you. Just, whatever you want to do, but share with us, what is it?
How long do I have, Angela?
Look, if we just do a sort of 5-10 minute sort of intro, and then we can have a conversation.
No problem.
Yeah.
I mean, thank you for giving this to me. It's my passion. It's my interest. It's my focus on the next stage in my own development, and I think in lots of other people's development. So Synchronicity is basically, there's lots of complicated definitions, but the simple definition is the ability we have for things to turn up in our lives that are unexpected and not logical, that give us answers to questions that we are currently facing and needing to be resolved. And I've kind of looked at this through lots of lenses of my own stories. So very simple example. I was in Pasir Panjang in 1994, and I needed $15,000 to close the books for that month. And at 10 minutes before 4, I remember this in my head, I can even see my office now, I need $15,000 to close the books this month, 10 to 4. 4 o'clock, the phone rang, and it was my dear friend, Dr. Fons Trompenaars, who is a culture thought leader. He said, Philip, what are you doing next week? I said, not much, I'm fairly free. He said, I need you to go to Beijing. We have a seminar there that I need you to do. I said, yes, I can go. He said, and the good thing is, money's good, it's $15,000. 10 minutes before 4, I need $15,000. 4 o'clock, the phone rang, $15,000. I think, how the hell does that happen? It's not logical, it's not rational, it just came. One of the most amazing things that happened to me, I was in Central, Orchard Road Central, meeting my financial advisor. And we were actually looking at, the coming year. But obviously, first of all, we were just chatting. And I said, Cliff, interesting. Last week was my birthday. I was 66. Nothing of it. And then I immediately said, and I had a strange dream last night. I dreamt that I was a freedom fighter in an ancient time battling against the government. That's all I said. First 1 minute. As those words got out of my lips, I looked to my left, and there was a guy walking away from me with a T-shirt, and on the T-shirt it said 66 freedom fighter. So synchronicity is about unusual things which have meaning for you, which straight away you maybe know the answer, but you have to think a little bit more about it to find, what is this saying to me? And so it's about moving from the logical brain-focused or logical brain a way of analyzing things to saying there's also bringing in our heart as well as our head, our heart as well as our brain, to look for some answers to the things that we actually are facing. So these things happened to me. I said, okay, let me talk to my clients. Talk to a CEO of a major European telecoms firm based in Thailand. And he said to me, Phil, I make most of my business decisions with intuition and synchronicity. Please don't tell my staff. So the freedom fighter part was around saying, we know that we make decisions in our lives, not just through logic. How many times have you gone into an interview process, interviewing somebody, and it wasn't your logic that chose the candidate, it was, I've got a feeling about this person. And so I thought there's legs to this, both in understanding my own life and actually understanding life of organization. So I did my PhD, got me thinking, did my PhD with David Cooper Ryder as my supervisor, great guy, founder of Appreciative Inquiry, one of the best experiences that I've had. And literally for my PhD, did grounded research with 25 executives who had had synchronicity happen to them. And the question I asked them for my field research was, what do you think facilitates synchronicity? So literally got from them a range of answers, ended up to about 179 that I pared down, that then ended up with giving me what I call the 9 keys of synchronicity. That's long story short. My PhD was obviously looking at the research into this sort of issue. It's not a new issue. It's been an issue around for a long, long time, part of the human decision-making process. And so the 9 keys, I'm just giving you the quick overview here. The 9 keys were able to be broken down into 3 keys, which are dealing with it as it comes up in the day-to-day. 3 keys which are about integrating into your life, and 3 keys, which are mindsets. And so literally my book, which comes out next month, which is a summary of the PhD, helps people understand the steps and the research behind why those 9 keys can help open you to synchronicity or have more synchronicity happening in your life. And so that's the rough kind of area of, step by step, what it all means. And I've just been fascinated by people's willingness and interest to talk about it. I've had people coming up to me when I've done this in seminars or conferences, wanting to say, I thought that this was the way the world worked many, many times before, but never really had it explained. Now, you've got to be careful, because obviously there are people who think that everything that you see is a sign, which is obviously not true. And there is there's a concept called confirmation bias, meaning that what you think about is what you look for, therefore it's what you'll see. And you've seen, I'm sure, many people who say, my favorite color is blue, and you're wearing blue, so that must mean we're friends for life. So I've tried to kind of dive deeper into that to help people understand a little bit more about the science. And so during my PhD, and part of my rollout of this program, which you'll see happening next month, is to help people understand that 100 years ago, we had a revolution in physics. We shifted and had the understanding that quantum physics replaced Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is saying logic and rationality rules the world. What you see is what you get. We are material, leading to materialist philosophy, and I end where my nose ends, and you are a different person to me. What quantum physics showed us was that we're actually all connected. That there is a quantum energy that connects the world, which is what I've looked at in terms of helping people understand what's the science behind this. So if quantum physics is true, and all physicists in the world say quantum physics is how the world operates, so Newton believed that the particle, i.e. material, the stuff which we are, is the whole of the reality about who we are. What quantum physics has shown us is that the particle, the physical skin and material matter that we are, is 0.1% of what makes up the human being. The rest is energy. We're all energetically connected, and that's 99.99%. So we're beginning to say quantum physics does help us to begin to understand this phenomenon called synchronicity, which we often access with our intuition. We have this sense of something, and something turns up that helps us understand that. It's a belief. I'm helping it move from a belief to actually people to think about this as the reality about how things are organized. So I'm helping people begin to think about, when was the last time that something turned up in your life unexpectedly, which solved a problem for you in a small or a big way? And that's synchronicity. It doesn't do away with logical problem solving, because obviously we have a brain and we act logically. But what we're about with synchronicity is accessing heart energy. And I do a lot of work with the Heart Math organization. If you don't know the Heart Math organization, I'd encourage you to go look at them. That's Heart Math, all one word. And the power of the human heart to regulate and access events before they happen is now no longer something that we dream about or think about or say is not true. In the same way that whether synchronicity is true or not, or the focus on things which are unusual, because the actual way that we access unknown events and not understood events is now no longer in dispute. The American government has said it's now not a question of whether these strange things exist or not. There is undisputable proof from around the world that we have this ability for the mind to exist outside the body. Now it's a question of how we actually make use of it. So the essence of synchronicity is about how do we attract answers to some of those questions that we can't find using our logical brain. How do we notice them, and how do we take advantage of them? Now, obviously, I'm focused on the personal and organizational area, and it's not difficult to look at this from a personal perspective. There are many, many books and many, many stories of how synchronicity impacts individuals at an individual level. I'm now shifting that into teams and into organizations, but I'm also fascinated as to how this operates on a global perspective. We talked about Chernobyl earlier. The week before the Chernobyl accident happened, all around the region of Chernobyl, people were having dreams about imminent catastrophe around the plant. So a week before it happened, people had that sense it was about to happen.
Right.
So I'm interested, obviously, in developing how individuals can access and use synchronicity, because you're already using it. I'm sure all three of you, at some point in your life, took a major decision based on an intuitive sense of what you should do. Not logical, using the left-hand side of the brain, but a way of accessing intuitive decision-making. What I'm interested in is helping people understand that a lot more. And so you maybe know or don't know, I've been asked for the APSS convention to do a pre-convention session on synchronicity and how synchronicity can be used in the way that people approach the next APSS convention in terms of what is it they're looking for in their lives. Because there's one of the factors about synchronicity is you can attract it by being very intentional, in the sense of, I know that what I need is another person expert in complexity theory for my company, or whatever it might be, and getting absolutely clear on that. And then, secondly, having a strong feeling about what it is that you want to attract. And that combination of brain and heart, thinking and feeling, sends a strong message into the quantum field, which attracts back to you that which you are thinking about. So, I mean, I could go on. You can see I'm kind of fascinated by this. It's going to be the rest of my life, probably in one shape or another, is going to be around synchronicity. We haven't fully understood it yet. My PhD was an attempt to say, how do I break down the components of synchronicity? And my book is, these three areas of what are the ways you notice it day by day. 2, what are the ways you can integrate it into your life? And 3, what are the mindsets that are needed to enable you to actually move forward to attract more synchronicity? Let me share just as the final thing, Andrea. The final thing is to say the top 3, the 7, 8, and 9 of my keys. Number 7 is having a mindset of possibility. All of us have a survival mentality in terms of what can go wrong. And I think the more, from my research, what people said, the more you have a possibility mindset of what could go right, the more likely you are to attract that. Mindset is everything, because mindset is a vibration. And with that vibration, you attract what it is that you're thinking about. Secondly, merge with the present moment. You access quantum energy by literally fully being in the present moment and be connected with all that you have in your present moment, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, but being fully here. Because if you think about what quantum physics says, all around us, all around you as you sit there, is quantum energy. If you think about 0.1% is your physical body, 99.9% is an energy around you, which means that your own personal energy fills a football field. And once you begin to think about that and what that might mean, it changes everything. And then my final key 9 is source. Now, it's a tough one because for me, source is about spirituality. But I'm obviously talking to many people who have left their faith or don't believe in anything outside of yourself. So I'm just saying that whether you're a Christian, a Buddhist, a Muslim, a Hindu, whatever it might be, source, which is the essence of life force, is when you access that, you're more likely to have synchronicity as a mindset happen to you. So knowing that, and then some people find this crazy to think about, somewhere, somehow, the world has your back. And there is a word for this called pronoia, developed by the Romans, who actually encourage people to have that sense of good things can happen to you. So every day I start my day for the last few years now with what good things can I expect today? And particularly, and this goes back to my first key, and then I'll be quiet and you can ask me questions. My first key is in every part of your day, look for something unusual, something that doesn't normally happen, an out of the blue event. You might get a different road to work. You might get a different restaurant you go to, but anything that comes your way that says this is unusual, don't turn your back on it, go there, because it actually may contain a synchronicity which wants to answer a question that you're asking in your life. So there you go. That's 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, 12.
So when you said the synchronicity wants to answer a question, what does that mean? The synchronicity? You said the synchronicity wants, there is a synchronicity.
There is a synchronicity which may happen, which may answer a question. So, for example, Tim, I have a friend who didn't want to go to an office party, to a party, because he was tired. But something said to him, you got to go. So he went to the party despite feeling tired. The first person he met had expertise in a particular domain that was vital for his team and he'd been looking for a long time. So intuition pushes you to a situation, and there a synchronicity happens, that unusual thing happens that leads you to an answer to your question.
So for me, the challenge here, Phil, is I'm skeptical by nature. I practice magic, mentalism. I create those circumstances where people believe something has happened. I have nothing actually to disagree with in terms of the attitudes that you carry with it. As you know, what you do, you enter life or go about life with the expectation of good things. You run with your intuition. I think there are lots of things that guide you there. The only thing that I have any kind of issue with is actually this thing about, when we talk about undisputable proof, I think what I'm saying right now wouldn't be even relevant if it was undisputed. I think there is still something out there. I know that there are scientific papers that talk about the phenomenon, but they're not unchallenged. They're not.
Joe, I have no problem with what you're saying. I don't think I've said undisputable proof. There are many people who will challenge that there is anything concrete about synchronicity.
You mentioned the U.S. government, so I was like, I'm not sure if they do that. Yeah.
Oh, there's been a lot of experiments in the military, especially with, by the U.S. government, in a lot of these areas for decades.
Yeah. So I'm just quoting there, Joe, from what, isn't it interesting, Joe? I actually have the page open of the US government. You just asked me about the US government statement. Let me just say what they say. It's going to take 30 seconds. This is from the US Congress report into phenomena, the paranormal. This is what they literally say in the report. The statistical results of the studies go far beyond what is expected by chance. Argument that these results could be due to methodological flaws in experiments are refuted. Effects of similar magnitude to those found in government-sponsored research have been replicated at a number of laboratories worldwide. Such consistency cannot be explained by claims of flaws or fraud. It is recommended that future experiments focus on understanding how the phenomenon works and how to make use of it. There is little benefit to continue experiments that are designed to offer proof. Now, in science, there is no such thing as indisputable proof. No such thing anywhere, because people will always challenge. But when an organization which is, not the most out of the blue as the American Congress are saying in our experiments, and they were particularly looking at remote viewing.
Okay.
And remote viewing was able to actually, an individual in one place was able to tell people where and what was happening in a remote location in another country. And those experiments are what they're talking about. So there's and this is, Joe, if you like, I'll send you the actual reference to the Congress report on this. I'm not.
When was this from, by the way?
This is, sorry?
When was this report from? I'm just curious.
Let me show you the key. I can send you the reference, but it's
right.
The system is good enough. It is from. Yeah, I've got to say that it's called it was the report done, commissioned by the U.S. government by a guy called Jay Utz, and I'll send you the link to the report. I mean, it's not disputed that the American government has actually done masses of research into the paranormal. For military purposes, it's fantastic to know if you've got a guy in Washington who can see what's going on in Russia simply by remote viewing. That's an advantage, right? So when you've got the American military confirming that from their perspective, this is now absolutely proven, their words, not mine. But those are words that I'd never use for talking to people, especially skeptics, Joe. All I'm saying in my synchronicity research is I've had amazing things happen to me, and I wanted to understand why.
Yeah.
Stories continue for people all around the world, and this is just something that we can dispute or not dispute. A lot of the people who dispute, and there are a lot, are of a mindset that this is not possible, and therefore they're not really open to any way it being proven.
So when I'm listening to you, Phil, I feel like we disconnected from half of our being, centuries ago, right? And
well, I can tell you exactly when we disconnected in the 1500s when
1500s,
Newtonian physics came in and said all this stuff is nonsense.
Yeah.
But the problem was that stories continued.
And that's followed by witchcraft trials and all the stuff that's happened since.
Yes.
And it happened over such a long period of time. We weren't really ever paying attention. I remember I was attending a Deepak Chopra day when he was in Singapore once. I was 6 months pregnant with Jax. And I just remember him saying, you have more thinking neurons in your heart than in your brain. And I was sort of sitting there thinking, wow, okay, this is kind of interesting because females tend to be more intuitive naturally than men, right? And it's something I've trusted, since my early 20s, traveling in Egypt and all these guys trying to rape me. And I just knew I was in danger before the danger came. So I was able to get out of it. Right. But for me, it's even more like I like the way you were talking about it. It's for me, it's a decision how you live. Right. So, the waking up and saying something great's going to happen today. I mean, this is literally how I live, I sometimes my husband and I have some, he's like, well, give me a plan. I'm like, oh, it's not really, I can't really give you a plan because I actually don't know what the outcome is that I'm working towards. I'm just following the path, and it's really what you're saying. It's just like I'm just leaving the door open to the possibilities, and I don't know what it looks like, and that's okay. At this point in my life, it's okay to be sort of heading this way, but there's a lot of peace and contentment in it when I feel that when we're working across the two, and even the deeper.
Sometimes it doesn't happen, Andrea. It doesn't happen all the time. But what I love about what you said was live in this way. So when something happens to you, often enough, and you have this incredible, how the hell did that happen? And then you begin to reflect and think that maybe this is the way the world is organized. And the more you delve into quantum physics, you see a comparison with that. And then you begin to live that way. I'll leave you with a final story, because I know you have to wrap up. I was appearing. Interesting. Now, this is a coincidence. You know, I used to appear on Singapore Morning News, Channel News Asia Morning, which is called Views on the News. And literally, you'd have to get there at 6 o'clock. They give you the stories for that day. And then you're on at 7 live, and you had to respond to questions that were asked. Things like, so Philip, who's a bigger threat to world peace, Obama or Putin? I remember that question came to me. And I did this so I could actually develop my ability to think on my feet, etc., etc., etc. One morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I looked at my phone, getting ready in a blur, and my phone said, message from a father. What? My father had been dead for 1 year. Now, a psychic friend of mine in the States, who was a professional psychic, not a crazy person, said, Phil, your dad has been bothering me for a while now. He wants to get this message to you. I looked at the message. She had actually written it down exactly as she told me her father had said to her. My father had said to her, hi, son, I hope you're doing well. Please know that every time you think of me, I think of you. I'm doing a lot of dancing where I am at the moment. Now listen to this next bit. I'm very proud of the work you're doing on the television box. You will do more of this. I love you, Dad. Now, no way in hell this woman knew I was about to appear on Singapore TV. And how the hell did my dad know? And he said, proud of the work you're doing on the television box. Who these days calls it the television box? My dad's generation did. And I was about to go and appear on television. So the profundity of that experience tells me that wherever my father was, and he'd been dead for a year, he knew exactly what I was doing. And somehow it was arranged that before I appeared on Channel News Asia, I actually got a message from him 2 hours before that I knew was from him. Now, I keep saying, if that's true, of course that's true as far as I'm concerned, because I don't see any other explanation for it. Then what the hell else is possible in this world of ours in terms of connection across the world and with people? Why is it that when you feel here in Singapore that your sister who's in London has some problems with her throat, and she calls you that evening to say, yeah, I had a very bad throat? How do you know that? How can you feel that? And there are far too many stories of that type of thing for us not to at least explore this whole thing further. And I think it's leading us, we're in a transformation away from Newtonian to a quantum age, and synchronicity is the harbinger for that change.
I also think there's another piece that was lost in the history of time was the dominance of monotheistic religions, right? So if you talk to one of your Buddhist friends or Hindu friends, that what you're talking about is part of their existence. From the day that they were born, it's part of their existence. And a lot of us who are born into these other cultures where it's like it's all been pushed back and pushed down and suppressed. And so I think it's also like, I think there's so much evidence in the world, if we're just willing to open our eyes, that it's happening all around us, and it never went away, right?
Yeah, no, that's the whole point, Andrew. We are all born with this. A lot of monotheistic religions and logical thought based on Newton. The whole of the world is organized around Newtonian principle of logic. And we're now, I think, in an age where we're beginning to get back brain and heart working together to the benefit of both.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the religions were around a long time before Newton.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So before that, but it's a progression, right? It's not change didn't happen suddenly. It was progressive.
Well, it's interesting though, Tim, because I think that Newton took hold because it suited as well the church for Newton to take hold. and there was a connection between the two in terms of what was true and what was not true. And I wouldn't begin to talk to you or discuss with you about religion, Tim, in terms of doctrine and Bible and philosophy, because you know more about that. But there's a lot of stuff in all religions that actually squashes a natural intuitive ability.
Well, there's a nice.
I may disagree with that, but we don't need to go into the big disagreement. So we'll be cordial there. But it sounds like it sounds like we're putting scientific terminology to things like prayer.
Yes. Prayer is affirmation for synchronicity. When you pray and you give your whole thought to prayer and your whole feeling to prayer, another explanation of it, or you can say, I'm directly appealing to God through the Holy Spirit, or you can say, I'm accessing the quantum field and impacting the person I'm praying for who's halfway around the world.
So one is submission to a higher power to help, and the other one is thinking that you can do it yourself through works.
No. The other is also submission to a higher power. If there is quantum energy, and the reality of how the world is organized is there is an energy system that we are part of and can influence that field.
That's not a higher power.
That's not different to saying the same to God.
Well, that's not that's not a higher power, and I think that's,
it's a system. It's an energy system.
Yeah, and it's something. So the concept of the higher power, the separation of us to God, they're up there, in there, but not in here.
I would not say I don't believe in a higher power that's separate from us. I think God, us, whatever you want to call it, is an energy system that we all are part of. I don't see from my way of looking at the world, I don't see God as separate from who we are. Same energy.
Yeah. So no, we should do this one over wine. Except Tim won't drink wine; he'll just drink pretend wine. But we should because it is a really interesting. Like, I don't believe that human beings have enough imagination to understand what is even remotely possible about how our world works, right? And I love exactly I love what you're saying. And to me, religion was shutting us down. And I'm not saying being religious shuts us down. I'm saying the man-made institution of religion locked us down and sort of suppressed what I think is possibly the most important part. And that's what Conversations with God. Did you ever read that?
Yeah.
When he described us all as individual. God, the concept, basically what he did was wanted to experience everything. So we are all individual divinations of God. And it was the first time I'd ever read anyone who even slightly mentioned that we are God. We are all God, and that was one of those moments where it was just like my brain exploded. And so I've been thinking about it a lot since. And then when you talk about it from a quantum physics perspective, it kind of that even resonates even better with me because it's an energy message,
Yeah, a lot of it comes to what you believe, and I think it sounds like you and I have thinking in common. I've always, not always, for as long as I can. I was brought up. My father was a minister in a Christian religion, and since I left that religion, my way of understanding God is that God is us. We are God.
Yeah.
And actually, there's no such thing as inner and outer. There's actually only energy passing through all of us. And that we actually, as individuals, are connected energetically connected to everybody else in the universe.
And everything, right?
And everything. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We could go on forever, but we're now 5:15. I'm happy to talk, but I don't want to stray beyond your
No, there's
I love these conversations.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think this needs to be over the fake wine thing, because, but our positions
Steve,
our positions have some overlap, but I disagree with that we're God completely. But we are made.
I wasn't saying that we are God. It was the idea of the individual divinations that just went, because the problem that we've got, let's go into the environment section. The problem that we've got is we're disconnected from source, and for me, source is Earth. It's not something up in the sky. It's here. We are so disconnected from life by the way we treat our own Earth, right? So I suppose that's probably, to me, where it more lies, because did you guys notice on Earth Day last week there was a guy called Win Bruce who set himself on fire outside the US Supreme Court? Did you see that? So self-immolation, right? So he's a Buddhist, and we know that in Burma we've seen that happen in the past, and it was an act of compassion to the world to bring attention to the urgency of the climate crisis. And it didn't get a lot of attention, and a lot of the early reporting was very misrepresentative of what he actually did and why he did it. But it was basically a moment that I think the world should have stopped and went, when people start doing that, we're at the beginning of a cycle where people are going to be doing stuff like that. And that's it's a big thing, right? So expect those sort of things to happen more. The other thing that's been happening in the world on the environment front, of course, this week, have you seen the heat wave in India and Pakistan? Yeah.
No.
So March was the last one. Now they're in another one. Oh, mate, if you go into Twitter, you'll just see photos of, it's terrible. You know, Pakistan sort of getting up around 50 degrees. We're in April. It's not June, July when the real heat typically comes in. So, but 35% of the crop, the wheat crop, has been damaged from these heat waves from March and now, and they're expecting this is going to last for a while. It's also coming in the north of Burma and Thailand. So I haven't seen a lot of news on deaths from this yet, but I'm expecting it to come. There's so many articles that in the environment section of the Weekend Reads. But let me tell you how seriously business is taking the the financial services industry. Asset managers have $82 billion invested in new coal and $468 billion in oil and gas. Wells Fargo, Citigroup, and a bunch of other big global banks. Their shareholders basically said, you've got to get your money out of fossil fuels. They have voted to keep financing fossil fuels. And then there's an article in The Guardian basically saying there's too many new coal-fired plants planned for 1.5 degrees climate goal. So basically, we need to keep all fossil fuels in the ground from today, and we can't be doing any new ones. And the UK is ready to vote for a new one, to get one going. So in the UN, saying 40% of the world's land is now degraded. And there's a story in Kenya, sex for water, what price are women and girls paying? And so basically, women and children will suffer more the effects of the climate crisis. And here's just one example. If you want to contribute to reducing the impact of climate, we need to reduce our meat by 75%. So that's a good goal to give ourselves, right? Which is good for our health. We're sailing into a stagnant ocean. There's a great article in CNA on the Thai situation with drought, and we've been into this area in Sukhothai, which is north of Bangkok, when the drought was really severe. It's quite frightening watching it, and Thailand will lose its ability will lose 10% of its capacity to deliver rice, which of course, not just the local insecurity that it's going to create, but the food insecurity that it's going to create. 2021 tropical forest loss figures put zero deforestation by 2030 out of reach. So this was another piece that came through yesterday. The good news is Indonesia has significantly reduced its deforestation, which I was thrilled to see. But Brazil and the Democratic Republic of Congo are still sky high. We lost a Cuba-sized area of tropical forest in 2021. Really, we've got to wake up. But I think the biggest story that I wanted to leave everyone with that happened this week is this week we passed our 6th planetary boundary, and this is green water. So green water is basically the water that's available to plants. So there's green water and blue water is the fresh water, and they only used to do the fresh water, the blue water. Now they're doing green water, and basically it's the bloodstream of the biosphere, and we are profoundly changing the water cycle. And one of the impacts is there's a whole section of the Amazon that has, if it doesn't have moisture in the soil, it's going to basically turn into a savanna. And there's a huge area where they think that's going to happen. There's another one on insects. There's lots in the environment section, but
that particular one about the green water, that was pretty scary to read.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where they said it's past that threshold because for the first time they changed the way that they were measuring it. They added green water into it, which meant we'd passed the threshold. And I get so frustrated with things like that, because it's like it's easy to combat that data or that alert or that alarm, because when you change the way you measure something and it now pushes you over a threshold, you go, now we're past the threshold because we changed the measure. It's like, well, if we didn't
it's not so much that they're changing the measure, it's that the research is becoming more comprehensive, right?
I mean, I get it from the scientist part who are like, actually, this is more accurate, and it's saying we're in a problem. But from the deniers who really, or for those who don't want to take that action, for example, the fossil fuel industry will go, well, that's the reason why that report is nonsense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just hand them the ammunition to tear down the report, and then it doesn't get the airplay that it deserves.
But I think there's enough other information going on there. Like one of the ones is we're basically experiencing a global collapse in insect numbers, and this is it's a hidden collapse. And basically, UCL's Center for Biodiversity Environment Research has now done the largest assessment ever of insects around the world, and they've assessed 750,000 samples from around 6,000 sites in the world. And basically in tropical habitats where there's farming, so first of all, the amount of diversity in the insect species in the farmed areas is down by 25%. But the majority of the world's estimated 5.5 million species of insects are thought to live in these tropical regions. And so therefore, because they're only just starting to study it now, they think that the planet's greatest abundance of insect life may already be suffering collapse without us even realizing that it's happening. So to me, it's not a case of, they can question that report because they've changed the way they report the data. There's, the floods in South Africa, the way the people who experienced that described how the water was falling, which links back to the rain bombs, which is a non-technical term in Australia, but they're becoming, like when you look at it all, like this NASA piece that was talking about corn yields going to be impacted by 2100, and I was challenging them on Twitter, because not that I want to challenge NASA, but I'm like, I think your 2100 date is wrong, because this is already happening. Maybe not to corn.
Yeah. It's like 70 years too late.
Yeah, and these things are already happening, and it's. If we look around the world right now at everything that's going on, it's all starting to, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And, even if we do everything right now to act, it's not going to stop it. But the more we do now, the less worse it's going to get down the track. And we're not even doing the minimum.
I feel like I need to go and buy all the betadine.
Andrea, can I say something? Because there's a basic issue here with these things, and we all read these reports. And I really have to say again, all kudos to you, Andrea, for sending us this stuff. I love the one on the insects. I also love the one on the futurist who talks about what the Ukraine war is doing in relation to forcing us to find an alternative to gas. I thought that was an interesting one. The problem with all of it is, and this is a stupid thing to say, I know, the problem with all of it is until we are literally suffering now, people don't want to do much about it and don't take much notice of it. And that's the biggest problem. Is like, okay, we know the world is going to end in 20 years. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's not now, so it's okay. And it's about how do we get people into the mentality of, even though it's going to be 20 years time when things are dire, and I particularly was scared by that report that said in 2030, there's going to be 1.5 disasters per day. Now I read that and say, that's 2030, that's 8 years away. So I should be worried about it. But why am I not? Why are people so reticent to take action now? And I think it's kind of like COVID, you know, until COVID is knocking on your door, you don't really take seriously all the preventive measures you have to do. So unfortunately, human nature is like that. It's like, unless it's actually stopping my living properly now, then I'm not going to do about it. How do we get past that? Because we know it's going to happen. How do we get past it?
It's a huge challenge. And, you know, I've been involved in the conversation on climate for a very long time, right? So one of the things that I take great hope from is 2022 in particular. 2021 definitely saw it, but 2022, there's a surge in the conversation around the world with people who are paying attention. People are quitting their jobs. You know, I don't know if you guys know this. I haven't earned an income for the last year and a half because basically Steve and I said, just go out there and do everything you can to achieve exactly what you're talking about, Phil. I talk to people about it. Like, you know, people say to me, friends say to me, I know I should be paying attention. I know I should, but I'm just not ready yet. And part of the thing that I'm trying to do at the moment is show people that actually when you start, okay, first of all, paying attention is very, very difficult because it is very grim. We are at a really bad point, right? So people have to make the decision to face something that is truly horrifying. And that's difficult. So that's the one thing. But the other side of the coin I'm trying to show people is that when you actually change and work really hard to live in balance with Earth, there's a joy in that. There's so much joy in that. Like, you know, it's like a cleansing of your soul to know that, you know, the way you think about rubbish, the way you eat, the way you shop, the way you travel, everything, you think about everything in a different way. You look at the world with different eyes. You'll see an insect, you know, and you'll go up to that little insect and you'll go, hello, hope you're doing okay. Let me know if I can help you. You know, and literally I talk to insects these days.
I always do that. I always do that, Andrea. I've done that for a while.
But there's
and to building.
Yeah.
And to trees.
But there's a joy, you know, there really is a joy in it. And I'm trying to convey that, you know, because it's a hard thing, right? But I'm trying to show people that if you can come with me and trust me, then come on this journey, and because we need billions of people doing this, and I think the only way we're going to be able to drive the change we need is from the bottom up, and so we need all of us stepping up and saying, right, I'm going to do it, and it's not a bad thing, it's a joyful thing, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, I understand that.
You know, but it's very difficult.
But it's kind of like you're preaching to the converted in a sense, because I don't see the same concern. But I'm an optimist. The reason, let me show you the shirt I wore today. Scott's shirt, right? When I first saw this, Together We Can Change the World, I thought that's kind of a bit over the top. But the more I work with Scott and see what he does, and all of us know and love Scott, actually, Together We Can Change the World is a fantastic rallying cry for all the stuff we've been talking about today. And I think it's, to me, yes, we need leaders, but I think we need not to depend on leaders. We need to be the people who say, I am the leader. I can do something. And it's like that little thing that you can do. Who knows how that becomes, you know, a river that actually moves us forward. Because otherwise I get just depressed. But if I wake up with the day with the feeling that everything I do can have an impact, then that's the way we're going to change.
Yeah, and everyone is depressed at the moment. There's a great depression that's going around the world, and we've talked about it before, but being that voice of hope in the mix and showing people a path, and if we can all do it, and we all ripple out, and we all create impact in our communities, and that's where I think the greatest change will come from. So,
this is where I take hope, Andrea. I mean, I know we can question my synchronicity stuff and all that, but if the reality is, as quantum physics says it is, we are an energy system, that means an energy that goes in from me and you and Tim and Joe that's positive can actually impact in a way that we've no idea it can impact. There's been studies where people were affirming and sending positive energy in America to a particular part of Sri Lanka where the violence was way out of control. And during the period when they were sending that energy, the violence went down enormously, measurably.
What's that study called? It's prayer and meditation as well, where they've studied the energetic.
This is why I was talking to you, Tim. I don't want to disparage prayer, but prayer is an energy system. And if we have an energy system, so as I look at you now, Tim, and if you were sick, I can look at you and transmit my energy to you, even online, that will then have an impact on you. Because if we are quantum energy and we are an energy system, then me putting my energy into this little part of the energy system can reverberate. And that's why doing and studying what I've done, as little as it's been, on quantum energy and what it means and the way the world is organized, gives me real hope. Because your powerful energy system, Andrea, that you're doing can reverberate in ways that you don't even know about and change things in ways that you don't even know about. So I'm optimistic about that.
Good. We need optimism. All right, let's wrap it up. What are you watching? What are you being distracted by? Anyone?
I hate to say this. Go on, Joe.
Oh no! I basically what happened was I changed phones, went back from the Android over to iOS, and everything seems to have changed. And the podcast app has changed as well, so I can't seem to catch hold of programs that I usually catch. So I've accidentally discovered some new shows. One of them is called Fly on the Wall. It's not world changing at all, but it just features two interesting people. I can't remember who they are right now. One of them was from Wayne's World. The other one is David Spade. There you go. So it's Dana Carvey and David Spade. And they just basically speak to a bunch of people, mostly from Saturday Night Live, it would seem. But they just have them on and talk about stuff. And I find it just a useful way for me to get into the minds of people who are creative and how they think about their process, because I think externally you think of them as just comedians, but it's both entertaining as well as enlightening, because they'll have guests speaking about things, and they had a very interesting perspective as well, about Chris Rock and Will Smith, which I'll leave to you to discover if you want to go and look out for that.
Cool.
Because as comedians and as joke writers, they had a very distinct perspective, and interestingly enough as well, because David Spade is the diminutive kind of person he is. So he's a rather short guy. It was triggering for him in another way, because he was bullied in school. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, Phil, are you watching anything at the moment, or reading? Podcasting?
I with my long COVID, and I've been actually for days and days just knocked out, literally knocked out, couldn't move, couldn't focus. I just go to see, what do they call it? My brain's gone. YouTube. And I actually scan intuitively through different aspects of YouTube, but wherever there's something which says kindness or positive or uplifting, I watch that. Football can be that as well. I look at kindness in different parts of football, because it floods me.
It's not positive for me, mate.
Sorry?
It's not positive for me at the moment, being a Manchester United supporter.
You have
number 6 is fine, isn't it?
It's going to change everything for you. Tim is going to change it all for you. And you drew with Chelsea last night.
That was nice, but we played terribly. It was just that they didn't score. But you guys look like you're going to come back up again.
I got Huddersfield. I'm coming back. Well, and that's kind of funny because what I'm saying, Andrea, is I'm looking and scanning as I go on YouTube anything that's going to leave me with a positive feeling.
I think that's such a great tip for people who get lost down like YouTube rabbit holes and find themselves in places they don't want to be, right?
Because what it does, again, this is from my synchronicity. Once you see positivity in whatever form elsewhere, because of the mirror neurons in our brains, we take on that positivity ourselves. And I've actually been in situations where just by watching a movie, and sometimes I'll watch the same movie over and over and over again. One that I watched was Blindside. Remember about the woman who got this American footballer and took him into her home?
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock, yeah. I watched that. Why? Because there's about 15 points of kindness that reduce me to tears.
Mm-hmm.
And when I know that I'm reduced to tears by seeing something beautiful, I know that I'm rebuilding my body and my brain to be oriented towards that. So I can't give you a specific answer, except I am watching Huddersfield.
Yeah.
But I know that what I'm doing is whatever I look, if it's positive, that's I'm going to watch because it will actually flood me with positivity.
I like that. All right, Tim.
I watched a few things actually. One of the things I watched was Schmigadoon. Was that the musical you were talking about that Steve was like, "What are you watching this for?"
No, that was Evan Hansen.
Yeah, Schmigadoon was like a couple of weeks ago, right? Wasn't it?
Evan Hansen. No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a couple of weeks ago. Did I talk about it? No, I think I watched it only after last week's show.
Oh, you messaged me, Schmigadoon. That's right.
I messaged Schmigadoon because I thought that was the one because they were singing about everything. Basically, this couple who are having a bit of a problem with each other end up on a marriage retreat where they go through this sort of fog and stuck in a musical.
Okay, so I don't think I'm going to get Steve to watch that now that you've said that.
No, I don't think you will watch it. No. But it was the funniest part for me was when because it's sort of set in a Seven Brides for Seven Brothers sort of 1950s sort of style, or even before that.
We've got a mini human on the no-show for the first time.
Pardon?
We've got a mini human on the no-show for the first time. Hello, Zoe.
Oh, there she is. Hello. Hi, Zoe.
Yeah, but good. Good. You like it?
I did like it. I did the series of about 6 episodes, and I ended up watching the whole thing. The bit I found particularly funny based on the sort of world that I'm in at the moment was the interfaith rally that they had in the middle of this town, and it was interfaith because there was Presbyterians and Methodists. that was the
nice.
interfaith thing. But that was only a one moment of it. But it was really quite nice because the two main characters were so against everyone singing all the time that you could relate to them being stuck in this thing going, oh my gosh, you're singing, no, don't sing. But it was very cleverly done. I thought it was really, really quite brilliant. I mean, I spent a lot of time in theater, so I did enjoy it. The Adam Project, something I've begun. The other thing I got lost in rabbit holes was on Curiosity Stream, and it's probably on YouTube because it strikes me as something that's come off YouTube and into this channel. So Curiosity Stream is a subscription channel that's got lots of different. It's like $70 a year. Got lots of different sort of documentaries, and it's called the series. There's multiple series, but the series is called Crash Course in History, and the guy that presents it's just sitting at a table, and he's got a really nice sense of humor, and the course is written by his high school history teacher and himself, and he's presenting it, and it's just a really nice summary of how the world works from a history perspective, why food production is so important and so completely changing, and then listening to what Andrew is talking about, that takes on a whole new meaning as we look into the future and look at history and what civilization is. And it's about food surplus and all this sort of stuff. And it was just, it's fascinating. And they're about 12, 15-minute episodes. And so there's a few spin-offs of it, but it's really, really nice.
Quite cartoony, sort of graphics, lots of graphics. I think there is some graphics in cartoons. He goes to this thing called a thought bubble when he explains something, which is his graphic department, which do a cartoon element. But otherwise, he's just sitting there with a globe and a picture, and he's got his little quirky little things that he does, like rituals within a show where he goes and writes an open letter to something. You know, like he wrote an open letter to the word awesome. And then he explains how we've diminished the use of the word awesome, but, you know, it's kind of still awesome. But from a perspective of getting a real, and he speaks very fast, but to get a real compressed view of a perspective of history, I just find it's like really nice. Well needed.
Really nice.
And well needed, right?
You honestly, I just feel smarter when I leave the show.
Right.
All right, we got
good.
Couple of quick ones for me. So I watched a show called White Hot, which is about the story of Abercrombie and Fitch. Any one of you guys had a look at that yet? Seriously? Oh man! So apparently
Crumble and Fitch.
Apparently to get a job there, you had to be a really good-looking person, and I don't know, it just sort of brought me back to Zoolander. But it's a really, really fascinating perspective. Yeah, exactly. And when I was in Singapore and I was standing on Orchard Road where the Abercrombie and Fitch shop used to be, and the first time I saw it, and these guys came out with their shirts off and these buff, chiseled bodies, I was just like, what the hell? So it's really interesting. Go watch it. It's I don't know, maybe a documentary, an hour and a half, something like that. But another series that's just started. I don't watch that much TV, so it's always on Netflix. But Barack Obama is now doing a series where he's going to the national parks around the world, and it's absolutely brilliant. And the very first one, it starts off with hippopotamuses or hippopotami surfing. They're surfing. I didn't even know they could surf because they're so big and heavy, but really quirky little sort of nature stories, and it's beautiful. And it's it was one of those days where the world's news was really overwhelming me. And
he was actually just filming Joe and me at the beach.
Yeah.
But if you need to pick me up, I can definitely recommend it. It was beautiful.
It looks great.
I agree. I saw it too, Andrea. It's great.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? Yeah. If you take out any opinions of Obama,
just hearing his voice stimulates my interest and positivity.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to say goodbye. Dr. Phil, Mary, thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom and insights, and pay attention, everyone.
Andrea, can I just say one thing? You guys have enabled me to buy my lights. I went out last night and bought lights.
I thought that was a defibrillator.
I've only ever had lights on one side, and I finally bought them for both sides. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, you've been well enlightened.
All right, well, send it on. So thanks, Phil. I really appreciate the time. Longest one ever.
It is the longest one ever.
We're going to have to shorten them. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. All right.
Yep.